Good evening, everybody. Good evening, members, officers, visitors, and members of the public. Good evening to you. Hopefully it's quite cool in here at the moment. The manner in which we conduct this meeting will elevate the temperature, I'm sure. My name is Councillor Andy Booth. I'll be chairing this meeting this evening. The meeting may be recorded and proceedings will be conducted in accordance with the Council's constitution, including procedural rules, which are all available on the Council's website. Firstly, please be advised on the original agenda pack, item 2.2, land at Pystock Farm, Rodmersham, has been withdrawn from the agenda this evening. There's a number of outstanding items which are still being worked on, but we aim to see that next month. Thank you. Agenda item 1 of the pack, that's the emergency evacuation procedure. We are not expecting a fire drill this evening. If you do hear the fire bell, it will be for real. Please make your way to the nearest available exit from this chamber to the left or to the right, and from the public gallery through the door you came in. Do not use the lifts under any circumstances. Make your way to the fire evacuation corridor and staircase. Ably offered by, or attendance offered by, Democratic Services who are present this evening. Okay. Yeah. Does anybody need assistance evacuating the building this evening? Should we need to? No, thank you. There is a muster point down in the car park and you will be guided to that. When the correct instruction is given, you will be allowed back into the building and we will carry on the meeting, hopefully. Members, you must consider each application based on what is written in the agenda pack. You make your decision based solely on planning judgment. Planning judgment includes using your head and using your heart. Members, I'm sure, are very aware of that. Following a decision by members, delegated authority is given to the planning officer to issue the decision notice. Planning permission is not granted or refused until that notice has been issued. Any member of the council who is not a member of the planning committee may attend as a visiting member and may speak, having given prior notification, and we do have that this evening. Such visiting members may of course include ward members, and whilst visiting members can speak on the application, they are not permitted to vote. Any member acting as a substitute on the planning committee must have undertaken the appropriate training before doing so this evening. Members must remain in the meeting for the whole item that is being debated, and you will not be allowed to vote if you leave the meeting on that item. Okay, I'd like to welcome our guest speakers and remind you that you have 3 minutes to speak. There will be an audible warning which will give you 30 seconds after that warning. I'm quite lenient, but don't push it, please. If the meeting is deferred to conduct a site meeting, you may speak at both that meeting and this meeting. So you get 2 bites of the cherry. The meeting will be carried out in order as set out on the agenda. I'm not aiming to change that order. Good. Everybody happy? Excellent. Agenda item 2. Philippa, please. Apologies for absence and substitutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies have been received from Councillor Julian Speed.
Carry on.
Who is substituted by Councillor Lloyd Bowen, from Councillor Kieran Golding, who is substituted by Councillor Shelley Cheeseman, and from Councillor Elliot Jays, who is substituted by Councillor Mike Baldock. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you to those councillors that are substituting this evening. Agenda item 3. This includes the minutes of the meeting held on the 14th of May. That is minute number 16 and 17. And minutes held of the meeting on 22nd of May, minute number 40 to 48. Members that were present at those meetings, are you happy for me to sign them as a true record of those meetings? Agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. I'll do that after this meeting. Agenda item 4. This is for members to have a declaration if they have disposable pecuniary interest or a disclosable non-pecuniary interest. Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you, Chairman. I called in item 2.3 due to the interest from some residents in Bordon, so they have the opportunity to speak. However, I will be attending as a committee member tonight, not as a ward member. I am not predisposed or predetermined.
Superb. Councillor Baldock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a member of Bordon Parish Council, I took no part in the discussions on 2.3 and 2.4. However, I believe I did take part in discussions on item 2.1 and will therefore speak as a ward member for that item and not as a committee member, and remove myself slightly over there so I do not interfere with the processing thoughts of my colleagues.
Thank you, Councillor Baldock. I'm happy to see you slightly over there. Is that as far as you want to go? Yeah, okay, cool. I'd like to remind the meeting that I beg your pardon. Sorry, Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Chairman. On 2.5, when this first came through some time ago to this committee, I did speak at that meeting, and on behalf of my residents, I come this evening with an open mind, having read the papers, as do I think several members of this committee from last time, but I have an open mind based on the latest information on that particular item. So I do not think I'm prejudiced or predetermined. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bowen. As I was saying, any more? Sorry. No, good. I'd like to remind the meeting that where it is possible, that a fair-minded and informed observer, having considered the facts, would conclude that there was a real possibility that the member might be predetermined or biased on any agenda item. The member should declare this possibility and then leave the room whilst that item is being considered. I think that's clear and understood by members. Okay. I will ask this only once. Has all of the committee read the agenda and understood it? Excellent. I don't like embarrassment. Part B, reports for Planning Committee to decide. So the first one we have is agenda item 5, which is 2.1 24-501839 stroke ADV Hooks Hole Farm, School Lane in Bordon. Can I please ask the officer for any update, please, other than what is written in the agenda?
Thank you, Chair. No update for this one.
Thank you very much. Can I then invite speakers? We have, please, Mr. Clive Sims, Parish Councillor for Bordon Parish Council. Councillor Sims. Yeah, please come this way. You're now centre of attention. When you're ready, as soon as you press the button, which I believe is the one on the left-hand side, you will have 3 minutes. As I say, there will be a reminder with 30 seconds to remain.
Bordon Parish Council asked for this application to be called in, so I thank you for allowing us to voice our concerns. Firstly, may I explain that on the initial proposal with the original sign sizes, the Parish Council made no comment. However, residents have brought to our attention that they feel the huge 8 metre by 3.5 metre north east sign is inappropriate. The 3 metre by 3 metre southwest sign at the front of the building's entrance, in the car park of the property and within other outline structures, we have no objection to. It identifies the front of a welcomed business to the area. Our objection is to the vast sign at the other end of the building facing the fields. If I can orientate the committee, as you drive from Key Street roundabout along Chestnut Street towards the Tudor Rose Public House, it is in the fields to the left-hand side of the road. The building is the large former barn sitting on the far side of the fields, which by design and colour blends into the surrounding countryside. It is a pleasant rural setting. The building is in fact next to a conservation area. The Parish Council would also like to point out that this conservation area was recently extended despite the knowledge of the Wises Lane development. Therefore, any argument that the development reduces the integrity of the conservation area is not valid. As said, the building is a former barn sitting in countryside setting, but the large proposed sign would overwhelmingly destroy the peaceful rural appearance of this part of our countryside. The new Platinum Way is visible in this area, but is there any reason to commercialise our countryside further? The sign is more in keeping with a trading estate or an industrial area. Commercial and development signs are a blight on our picturesque scenery. You must all have noticed the increase in signage from every angle. We have to ask, with modern technology and websites, surely there is no need for such intrusive, aesthetically damaging signage in rural Swale and thus this countryside area. For these reasons, we ask you to reject this latest proposal appertaining to the north-east sign. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Sims. Plenty of time left. Perfect, thank you. Members, as is customary, I will move the officer recommendation. Is that seconded, please? Thank you, Councillor Clark. Do we have a ward member? Councillor Baldock. Councillor Baldock, you have again 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Always awkward following somebody who's just said what you were going to say. I think the main issue here is the fact that it is in the countryside. There's a countryside gap. And I'm a bit concerned that item 7.7 in the agenda, in considering the impact of a proposed signage, important to acknowledge the context. The host building now sits has changed quite considerably in recent times. But also in recent times, the conservation area has been extended. The conservation area extends between the proposed signage and Chestnut Street. So this is on the countryside side of the countryside gap. Now, I don't see that referenced anywhere in the report, but it's quite a significant decision to allow this sort of urban development when we've recently reviewed the countryside gap, extended it, the conservation area, and actually extended it in the area that this is going to affect. We have conservation areas because of the importance of unwelcome development. This is slap bang having an impact on that extended conservation area. I do think it should have been considered in the report. I'm surprised that we are agreeing it. I would appreciate if at some point a map could be shown showing the new conservation area, because I think that would be helpful to members. But I'm disappointed that it hasn't been directly addressed, because this will have what can only be described as an urbanising impact on a conservation area. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Baldock. Do we have any visiting members that wish to speak on it? Councillor Winkless.
Sitting member, I'm obviously on the committee, but I do wish to speak when you...
You want to remain in that chair, or do you want to move as well?
Call me when you... I'll speak when the time is right.
You sure?
Yeah, thank you.
The time may never be right, Councillor Winkless.
Thank you, Chair.
May never. That's your call. Yeah. Anybody else? Councillor Hunt.
Thanks. Do we have any photos of what these look like and the area that's been mentioned in the previous comments?
We do. We'll come on to that, Councillor Hunt. So it has been proposed and seconded. Okay. I now open that up for debate. Before we do that, go on, Councillor Winklis. Go on. Throw your card in now.
A bit of an impulsive move tonight, sorry, Chair. First of all, can we have in my usual fashion, a picture of this proposed site for the proposed sign, please?
Of course we can. Can I ask that we just go through that process as well?
Of course, Chair.
Chat everybody through it.
I'll just share my screen, which you'll be able to see in a second. Got it? There you go. Don't know how well it's going to share from there. There you go. That's better. So as you know, it's an application for 2 signs on the building at Hooksall Farm near Chestnut Street. So this site location plan here shows the building outlined in red. You've got the new roundabout to the north and Chestnut Street to the west. Here you've got the actual signage. So you've got the 3 by 3 metre sign on the southwest elevation and the 8 by 3.5 metre sign on the northeast elevation. And here you've got some photos. So you've got, that's the front, kind of essentially where you access the business. And here's the rear elevation. So you can kind of see there's at the moment there's like a fabric sign in situ on that elevation from that view to the right. And here again there's the sign, well the building actually, sorry, in the context of the roundabout that's currently in situ. And for the reasons recommended in the report, the application is recommended for grant. I don't know, Chair, if there's anything in particular you wanted me to comment on.
I'll ask them in the order that I saw. Councillor Winklis, then Councillor Hunt, just for clarification. Is there any more you need? Fab? Councillor Hunt.
Yeah. I don't know if I missed it, but we actually got the detail of what the signage is. Did I look somewhere else when that slide was there?
Oh.
And also the oh yeah, there it is. And also the conservation area.
Yes, I can bring that up. If you just bear with me 2 seconds, I'll just bring out the conservation area. Just have to share my screen on that one. So here in yellow is the conservation area. So that building, orange here, to the north, that's the building to which the adverts will be attached.
Councillor Hunt, happy?
Well, it depends what we're talking about, but yeah, I'm happy with this. Thanks.
Thank you. I saw a hand up. Councillor Bonney, did you want to?
Well, I might as well speak. I was going to ask for the conservation area, but I think that's just crystallised my thoughts. This is quite a prominent location, and I have a degree of sympathy, I think, with both the ward member and the parish councillor that spoke. Where the conservation area butts right up to this, I can see why the building's not been included, because it is a modern building, but that doesn't mean that just because it's outside of the conservation but sits right next to it, we shouldn't take heed of the protection that is provided for a conservation area and the integrity of the countryside there. And I have to say, it is my pet hate, advertising, when I see it splattered all over various bits of the public realm. And it kind of, poor signage or signage that isn't appropriate really kind of demeans an area, or can demean an area of its value and its intrinsic value. So I think here, yeah, I'm not sure I actually support the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bonney. The question was also asked about the conservation area. Can we have a view of that, please, and where this application sits in relation to that?
Yes, Chair. So the building itself is outside of the conservation area. The conservation area, as Councillor Baldock said, was extended as part of an appraisal in 2021, but it didn't include the building. That said, the report itself, kind of particularly I think through paragraph 7.7, 7.9, discusses actually the signage, and actually in 7.9 itself discusses the impact of the signage in the context of the conservation, the setting of the conservation area, which is what we're considering. We did consult with the council's heritage consultants, who didn't raise any objection to the proposals, and for the reasons set out in the report, it was considered a sufficiently sensitive proposal, kind of taking into account the existing context. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please, Councillor Thompson.
It's just so I've got it right in my head. We've got the east and the west end. Was there anything put forward? Was the 8 metre one on the one that faces from Chestnut Street, as it were? Just so I've got it right in my head.
Just to clarify, please.
I'm not that good with the area, so. Oh no, it's each end. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's not a sign being put forward to go that cuts across from the visual of the conservation area, looking from the road at the bottom.
So Platinum Way to the north, which is the new road that extends into the Wisers Lane development, essentially what the conservation area does is it goes round the building, kind of to the west elevation and the north elevation. Yeah, but the building itself isn't within.
Yeah, no, I get that bit. I just wondered there wasn't a sign on the
so
other main face.
No, the only two signs that are proposed are those.
Okay, thank you. That's all right.
Members, anything else? Okay. For clarification, again for members of the public, while I'll propose the application and that is seconded, that does not give an indication as to which way I may or may not vote. Okay, it's just so that the members of this committee can engage in discussion over that particular item. It's just a formality, that's all. So, no further Councillor Clark.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to echo your last comments. Likewise, if I second the proposal, it is not indicative as to how I will vote on a particular item.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. It just keeps things crystal clear. Okay, no further shows. The recommendation is to approve. All those in favour, please show. All those against? And abstentions? Okay, that is approved by this committee. Thank you very much. Okay, members. Welcome back, Councillor Baldock. Agenda item 6 has been removed. Agenda item 7. This is 2.3, 24-502717 outline, land west of Borden Lane in Sittingbourne. Can I please invite the officer to give an update over and above what's in the agenda pack?
Thank you, Chairman. Updates received since the agenda was prepared. I've received a further rep from Southern Water, just reiterating previous comments, and then an additional rep from one member of the public asking what the point of objecting is, as it feels that no one listens. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I'll answer that because we do listen. We have a speaker again. Please can I invite Councillor Lee Small, representing Borden Parish Council, to the microphone, please. Good evening. Same procedure, Councillor Small. As soon as you're ready, press the button and your 3 minutes will start.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you on behalf of Borden Parish Council for allowing us to speak and voice our concerns about this application. Borden Parish Council have various concerns regarding lack of parking, gas mitigation from the adjoining ex-landfill site and the ecological impact on both the application site and Borden Nature Reserve. The lack of parking and public transport still remains a concern, as it will likely lead to parking on Borden Lane and surrounding roads. This site is very close to the new Platinum Way link road and roundabout, which is currently being constructed. We remain concerned about the apparent conflict between the statement that mitigation measures will be taken against the effect of gas on the site and the statement that there is no gas on the site. We understand that this can be mitigated for via conditions, but it raises the question of the validity of the reports provided by the applicant. We believe it's inappropriate that the latest KCC ecology report was not made available for Borden Parish Council to review in time before this meeting. Unfortunately, the Badger survey is confidential, even to the members of this committee, so it's been impossible for the Parish Council to review the ecology reports in their entirety, and we're therefore reliant on that KCC ecology advice that wasn't made available to us in time. There's a worrying lack of detail in the applicant's ecology survey that we could get access to. As you can see in the officer's report, where it's documented that there is no description of the current condition of the on-site badger sets, and not all trees were checked for roosting bats, even though they are suitable to sustain roosts. There is no proposed mitigation for the badgers. The surrounding green space is an ex-landfill site with minimum topsoil, so it's impossible for badgers to dig. There's 5 species of bats, slowworms and other reptiles which are on the application site. There's no detailed mitigation lighting plan regarding the on-site nocturnal species that are there. As you will see in both the applicant and officer's report, the application will result in the loss of 2/3 of a traditional orchard and harm that cannot be mitigated for on Borden Nature Reserve. This application conflicts with the Council's local policy plan ST3, which states the development will not be permitted unless supported by the national planning policy and able to demonstrate that it will contribute to protecting and, where appropriate, enhancing the value, landscape and beauty of the countryside. It also conflicts with policy DM28, where the development proposals will conserve, enhance and extend biodiversity, and where possible minimise any adverse impacts and compensate where impacts cannot be mitigated. It's not going to be possible to provide a 10% biodiversity net gain, as it's been proposed as off-site mitigation on a farm field in Faversham, 10 miles away from the application site. It's not an orchard, it's purely agricultural land, and it's going to take up to 5 years for an orchard to be established.
That is your time, Councillor Smith.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Can I now call Mr. Ian Hunter, please? Good evening, Mr. Hunter. Hopefully you heard the initial brief, but the button on the left-hand side, as soon as you press that, your 3 minutes will start.
Good evening, members of the Planning Committee. I'm here to speak today on behalf of my neighbours in Borden and as someone whose family will be personally and profoundly affected should this proposal go ahead. We strongly object to the planned care home development. The proposed building will directly overlook my property, intruding into 11 windows, compromising our privacy and peace. My wife and I suffer from serious health conditions, and the continual stress, noise and disruption this development would bring us are not merely unwelcome, but could be harmful to our well-being. The sense of sanctuary that we and many others rely on to manage our health would be shattered. This facility would bring round-the-clock noise from generators, air conditioning units, ambulances, delivery vehicles and staff movements. Coupled with intense lighting, it will ruin the tranquil rural character we all value. This isn't just about nuisance, it's about how we live, sleep and recover. The land is not vacant, it has been used for livestock for years. It is also home to roosting bats, woodpeckers, tawny owls, hawks, and is thriving with foxes, rabbits and mice. It is also a passageway for badgers and stoats. The biodiversity report highlights significant shortcomings, and relocating habitat to Faversham is an empty gesture. Wildlife doesn't just shift on command. If this is developed, that ecosystem will be lost forever. The site lies on a dangerous bend just beyond my house, a known speeding hotspot without footpaths. The proposed 30 parking spaces for a 65-bed care home are wholly insufficient. Overflow will force vehicles onto the already treacherous spot, putting pedestrians and drivers at risk. It is no exaggeration to say this could result in fatalities. This land marks the last buffer between Sittingbourne and Borden. Approving this development would not only ignore previous planning refusals, but it would also hasten the erosion of our village's distinct identity. Borden is not just geography, it is community, heritage and a way of life that is being chipped away. Dozens of residents have voiced opposition through the council's planning portal. This is not a fringe objection, it is a full-throated defence of our rights, our environment and our future. If this approval is granted, we would challenge it through every legal route available, because the people of Borden will not be ignored. Please reject this proposal. Protect the peace, health, safety and heritage of Borden. Let good planning be respectful and just. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hunter. And can we now see Mr. Ryan Nichols, please? Good evening, Mr. Nichols. You know the procedure, I think. Over to you.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening, and thank you to officers for their very detailed, thorough report on the application. Currently, the need for care home beds in Swale Borough Council stands at 411 beds. That is a shortfall in Swale of 6 care homes of a similar scale to that proposed here, and they are all needed at the time of this application. Swales Borough Council local evidence base identifies the scale of growth in the 75 and over population over the plan period of circa 6,000 people, a growth of 43.7%. It's therefore clear that there is a significant current shortfall in care home beds, and the demand for beds is growing at a considerable rate. The benefit of delivering new care homes therefore cannot be overstated. Local people are in need of these beds now, and this need is immediate. Prospective residents cannot wait for years for care beds to be available. They require beds now, or they face significant detrimental impact on their health and well-being. Finding sites that are sustainably located, capable of delivering a care home and available for care developments in a busy market where care is competing with residential developers is incredibly difficult, and so any site must be given substantial weight in favour. Your officers have confirmed that the delivery of care beds attracts substantial weight in favour. Significant additional benefit arises from the delivery of a care home. It doesn't only meet the specific need for care beds, it provides a direct contribution to the council's 5-year housing land supply and provides long-term employment. Your officers confirmed the delivery of 70-bed care home would contribute 37 dwellings at a time when Swale Borough Council's land supply shortfall is significant and persistent. Your officers identify substantial weight in favour of the housing land supply calculation. The care home will create 40 full-time equivalent jobs. This is over and above the usual economic boost from economic development. Your officers ascribe significant weight in favour in relation to employment generation. The Council's 5-year housing land supply shortfall means the tilted balance is engaged, and development should be approved unless harms significantly and demonstrably outweigh the numerous benefits that individually and cumulatively weigh substantially in favour. Your officers find that the harms are outweighed by the benefits and recommend planning permission is granted. The traditional orchard on site has been surveyed by a qualified ecologist and found to be in poor condition, having not been used and managed as an orchard for some time. All cherry trees within the orchard were considered to be either dead or dying and no longer producing fruits or producing an unviable harvest. Furthermore, the land to the site has been changed from orchard to storage of materials, and the southwest section was used to keep a small herd of goats. Your officers confirmed that in accordance with policy, the submitted information contains details of mitigation and compensation. To mitigate, a significant area of traditional orchard at the front of the site will be retained and enhanced with additional planting and a management plan. This is shown on a parameter plan and will be secured by condition. To compensate, off-site, a traditional orchard will be created. This forms part of the biodiversity net gain condition and will be subject to long-term management to achieve a far better condition orchard than exists on the application site. The use of planning conditions affords the Council full control to enforce the delivery of mitigation and compensation. KCC Ecology has confirmed it's satisfied the approach taken is appropriate and raises no objection. In relation to protected species surveys, a full survey season of bat surveys, badger surveys and reptile surveys have been provided. KCC Ecology raised no objection to any of the details and confirmed that sufficient information has been provided to determine the application. Parking numbers are provided far in excess of Swale Borough Council's parking standards SPD. There is a considerable headroom of 7 spaces provided on site over and above the requirements from the SPD.
You're almost there, Mr. Nichols.
Sure. Okay.
About 4 seconds.
Safe to say that your officers have conducted a full assessment of the application and concluded that the harms, the benefits of the application outweigh the harms, and I respectfully request that you endorse your officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. I believe we have a small presentation on this item, which we'll see first before we proceed.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is the application site outlined in red here. And just to provide some context, so apologies for my crude IT skills, I've just tried to superimpose the road link that's going to come through from Wises Lane on, just to provide some context as to how that relates to the application site. So yellow is the Borden Nature Reserve. We've got the application site here in red. There's a building there on site that you can see. This is the adjacent neighbouring property at 124 Borden Lane. Sittingbourne to the northeast, and then Borden to the southwest. Just some photos looking across the access. So the top left, as you're looking at it, is my car park there in the access. And then that way you head towards Borden. The other direction is Sittingbourne, and then this is the access from within the site. This is the adjacent property at 124 Borden Lane. This is the site next to it here. This bottom one is looking from within the site towards Borden Lane. And then just to give you an idea of the relationship with the existing building and the neighbouring property at 124 Borden Lane. We've then got indicative block plan. So as mentioned, it is outlined, so everything's reserved for future consideration should it outline be granted. So this is one way the applicants would envisage it coming forward on the site. So this is an H-shaped block, which is a common configuration for care homes with the parking behind and the substation behind. And just to show the parameter plan, so during the application, these 2 drawings, this one shows the retained orchard to the front of the site, and it was requested by KCC Ecology that this is forms a parameter plan. So if it is approved, the condition would approve this, and that means the development cannot go into that area. and then there's a construction buffer zone as well towards the northwest and northeastern boundaries of the site. And then indicative elevations just to show what the development could look like if it came forward. And this is something that officers would strongly encourage taking this approach to try and make it appear as separate dwellings that are linked rather than a big sort of bulky width building. But obviously that would be for future if it was approved. Some more indicative elevations, and that's it.
Thank you very much. I'll move the officer recommendation. Is that seconded? Councillor Clark, thank you very much. Ward member. No? You're going to speak as visiting member to speak. Visiting member. That leaves you, Councillor Baldock.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I had a couple of queries on this one. We've heard that there's a demand for care homes, and yet there are vacancies at most of those already within the Bordon area. When you're planning for a long period of time, these things have to be built in as part of a programme so that you're meeting an increasing population. The indication is at the moment that demand isn't there. And what we need to be doing is ensuring that in future large developments, we take a more proactive attempt to try and get care homes included. Something I've been saying for a while, just saying. The other point I'm really concerned about, I think one of the speakers mentioned it would be in conflict with several of our policies. It is, of course, the countryside gap. And this has a significant impact on what's left of that side of the countryside gap. It eats up a lot intrudes from Bordon towards Sittingbourne considerably. I'm also concerned at what's being said about wildlife habitat. Now, I'm familiar with the presence of wildlife in the area. We have videos of them constantly on Facebook. So it concerns me that there doesn't seem to have been much recognition of that, and yet us as committee members are not privy to the full details. And I was wondering, is there a way that the in-confidence information could be shared with this committee outside of the committee so that we can actually make informed decisions? This is quite a worry when we're being asked to give a go-ahead or not on the basis of information we can't see. So that's a little bit of a worry. Now, the report does say significant weight should be given to policies DM25 and ST3 in respect of the important local countryside gap. It requires significant benefit to overrule those policies, and given the harm to the wildlife, I'm struggling to see this increased benefit. I'm also quite shocked by that picture we just saw there, because that shows that the cars are all going to be right next to the nature reserve. Now, I had imagined, because I may not have read this quite as closely as I would have done had I known earlier I was going to be sitting on it, I imagined that the protected woodland would be towards the back, where the nature reserve is, and that cars would be towards the front. But instead, we've got cars driving up the side and going right next to the nature reserve. That's going to have a considerable detrimental impact on wildlife in that area. That's a really concerning feature. I know we can put conditions on, but conditions only mitigate. They don't remove the harm. And in the overall balance, I feel that weighs, in my mind, against the benefits. So I do have those concerns. Traditional orchard as it stands is a priority habitat. Now, I don't know how much you you need to do to be a professional. But if you consider, I mean, dead or dying is a fact, isn't it? We're all dying, but if something's dead or it isn't. So trees being considered to be either dead or dying, it's like, well, are they or are they not? We've heard that there's still goats being stored on there. Well, not stored, grazed, bred, whatever. So this shows it is still providing a agricultural use, an agricultural benefit. The idea that we can swap that for something in Faversham seems a little odd, when what we're swapping in Faversham means the loss of further agricultural land. So, it's not even swings and roundabouts, it's all roundabouts. We lose it. If we're going to save the biodiversity, we're going to lose more agricultural land. So you've got to put that into the mix when you're weighing it up. So when we get the conclusion significantly, there's a requirement, but it has to significantly and demonstrably outweigh the harm. I think the harm is quite high. I think that the benefits are limited, given that, as I say, there are already vacancies in Borden. I haven't checked people haven't checked other care homes. We need to be putting forward a plan or putting into new large applications a requirement they put the housing, residential housing there. That's what we need. We don't need it dotted around like this. This is not the answer to our immediate problem, and it won't be a significant answer to the long-term problem. So I'm struggling to see how the balance is in favour. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Baldock. I'm getting a number of requests to speak, so we'll deal with yours first. The matter with regards to confidential information will be dealt with outside of this meeting for future reference. I think there are laws governing storage of goats. That's not for us to decide this evening. But Carly, do you want to tackle Mr. Baldock?
Might come back on some comments, but I don't think I'll tackle him. It is a balanced application, and that's the way the report's written, and members may choose to balance different things in different ways. What I would say is that in terms of the need, yes, I understand what you're saying, and it would be good to factor them into major developments, but that is part of the problem that Swale faces. We don't have an up-to-date local plan where those allocations are there, and so in terms of what is allocated and the built-up boundaries providing for that accommodation, that's not working at the moment. And so when you look at other appeal decisions and then the weight that you have to attach, if you take account of those appeal decisions, of course, the weight that you attach to those decisions and then the provision of that type of accommodation coming forward, it's substantial weight. So there's a couple of appeal decisions cited in the report. So yeah, that is part of the problem. And so the report clearly states there's conflict with ST3. But yeah, the weight carrying forward for the type of accommodation and the need demonstrated by the applicant, which also ties in with the existing local plan, which, as I say, is out of date. So the current HMA also states a need. There's no other evidence other than anecdotal evidence from the members of the public to say that there are spaces. So we don't have anything substantial to then argue that, and therefore there is a need that's been demonstrated. So that's why we've balanced in that way. And just in terms of the traditional orchard would be deemed as agricultural, so going onto the land in Faversham wouldn't be losing agricultural land.
We're losing agricultural land here, so it is still a loss.
Yes, yeah, it is. Just referring to the agricultural land in Faversham. But the BNG process allows for loss of priority habitat on a site. It does come at a higher cost in terms of the units that then need to be re-provided. And the hierarchy process in terms of the BNG rules allows for mitigation, compensation to be provided off-site. So that Act allows for that process to happen, and so there's, that's in accordance with that process, and it's secured for 30 years. So although it may take 5 years to establish, it needs to be established and managed for a period of 30 years. So that's why that we felt that the mitigation and compensation is suitable in this instance. Thank you.
Well, you can come back, Councillor Baldock. We've got one apple. You can have a second bite when we've done the first apple.
Thank you.
I'll take two at a time now. Councillor Bonney and Councillor Thompson.
I was just asking whether the reference to the other applications were in the report, so I could find them.
We'll come back to you. Councillor Bonney and Councillor Thompson first, please.
Thank you. Right, first off, so in the effort to be totally transparent, I'm on various Facebook groups, and I think we all are. We see things, so I've seen various posts over time about wildlife in Borden. The second thing is I took up beekeeping back in 2017, and might think this is completely irrelevant, but I used to help a beekeeper. It happened to be on this site. There is at least 20 beehives here that were absolutely thriving. I remember seeing the trees when they were alive and well. I also went in that barn because the beekeeper kept his equipment in there. So what I can tell you from what I've seen of the site, I don't know who owns it, I've no idea, I've got no attachment, and that beekeeper has since moved away, so it's not his land, but he used to effectively borrow it. But it has a really good connectivity to the neighbouring wildlife site. And there's a few things I've learnt recently, rather shockingly, through the public inquiry. KCC Ecology don't come out on site. They don't visit it. They do desktop studies. They admitted that in Highstead Park, much to my disgust. But that is a major downfall, because they're looking at desktop reports, they're giving advice based on desktop reports, and they've not been out on site. Now, I've also learnt a few things about badgers too, and we did see where the badgers were in that public inquiry. It was made a document that was then obviously not available to the public, but we should be able to see that. And why that's important, because on another application that's called Stones Farm, there were badgers and they were relocated. And what happened was, when they relocated them, and you can go to the site of, I know where they are, the relocated sites, they're artificial things made with crates, and they've all failed. And badger sets are not for 60 years or 70 years, they go on for decades. So the damage we do in our interconnectivity to ecology sites and runs, and I've got badgers that run through my garden, so I fully understand how they work, the way they live, is the way this site is laid out, with the car park, as you quite rightly say, at the back, backing onto the nature reserve, knowing full well there are badgers on site and that KCC have only done desktop studies. I think this council would be in a very precarious position to approve this without having gone back, either adjourned and done a bit more investigation as to how that is fully connected to the neighbouring site. Because at the moment I can see what is a green site, and what I remember from turning up on site and beekeeping is its connectivity to the site opposite. You know, wildlife is not contained by a fence. Now, I don't know many nursing homes that don't have a fence around them and are not secure. How are we going to condition this in a way that will not hurt or inhabit the nature and wildlife site immediately behind this? This is a significant factor here. I hear what you say about countryside gaps, and I totally endorse and agree with that. But I'm looking at specifically what's on site, how it's being dealt with, and I mean, quite frankly, this stuff about mitigating it off-site is absolutely bonkers. But the experience that we have learnt, that Swell has learnt, that moving them to site, even within the same site, is not successful, not always successful. But how can we say that we are encouraging biodiversity and ecology? And today, again at the inquiry, we talked about the Kent Design Guide, and it's really specific here. It says ecology is the existing or potential natural habitat of a site is measured by its biodiversity. opportunities for retaining and enhancing local biodiversity, educational benefits, etc. Plants and animals that keep people in touch with their natural environment. I don't think that this application achieves that in any shape. So in my consideration, I think the planning balance needs to be tilted away from approval tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Bonney. Councillor Thompson.
I'm probably going to echo the opinions of my last two councillors. Basically, with green space and looking at Borden, it's been quite eroded recently, and I'd like to see, if possible, if we've got a plan of the housing that's proposed lower down behind the nature reserve, just to give us an idea of the space. Not the one that's coming up on this application, but the ones that are currently being built where the road goes through just behind. I wondered if it goes behind the nature reserve and then round to the left or not. But that aside, if possible, but if not, don't worry. But for me, it's the feeling of the mental health for the people within Borden. They're living there because it's a little village of Borden and it's a green space. If we remove that connectivity, they just feel part of Sittingbourne. Their sense, their spirit of place is lost. And I think that's a really key thing that we tend to lose when we start joining up villages. People's identity and what they feel where they live is one of the big things for me. And it's the last little bastion of green between Borden and Sittingbourne. And so for me, that's one of the main factors. Going back to what they were saying about biodiversity net gain, bigger, better, connected, and to John Lawton making way for nature, are both of those large policies have said that biodiversity net gain in small pockets does not work. So we need to be careful with that. What we've got here is a lovely green corridor that joins between the two with the allotments. Much better. Transverse of wildlife. We're losing adders at the moment. Genetically, they're low. Okay, that road's quite busy. Fairly unlikely to cross, but may do. The more we build on that, the less likely that's going to happen. Small reptiles. And going back to that, basically wild zones, the feeling of being separate from Sittingbourne is a really key point, whether it be for the wildlife themselves or whether it be for the residents that live in Borden. That's all I've got to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Carly.
I'm just trying to... I've got the phasing plan. That's the one I can pull up quickly, if that helps. You're talking about the Wises Lane development? Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yep, that one? Yeah. So,
can you show us where the site...
Yep. This is the nature reserve. Just this bit. So this orange is the rugby club phase, and then you've got this sort of bluey turquoise. That's part of the Wises Lane development, and then this is the nature reserve here. And your closest residential accommodation proposed is these two parcels, which we currently have a reserve matters application in at the moment, which is live. So that those two there are under consideration, and then the purple through there is the Spine Road running through.
What's the sort of lighty green?
This, that's going to be sort of retained as green space, and then that's the site just there coming off that plan.
Fab. Could you deal with the questions that Councillor Bonney and Councillor Thompson raised? A lot of it was commentary, wasn't it?
Yeah.
No, we'll come back to you, Councillor Baldock. Patience, please.
Chair, could we open the door? Because I think we might have a few people expire otherwise.
Yeah, please.
Thank you.
Okay, with no questions then. Councillor Clark and then Councillor Winkless.
Thank you, Chair. Pick up on a couple of, well, they could be construed as minor points, but they're not. I'm very concerned about the access into this site being on such a busy piece of road, right on a corner. Now I note that as per normal, KCC Highways raise no objections and make no comment on this particular site. Maybe it's too small for them, maybe it's not, I don't know. But having known that road for many years, I can tell that there's going to be an accident there sooner or later, which brings me on then to a cumulative effect, because you've got the roundabout coming out onto Baldon Lane, not so many metres away from the entrance to that site, which is obviously going to be very busy. You've also got two entrances which will be coming out onto Baldon Lane either side of Riddles Road and the Riddles Road exit, which are the to do with the next agenda item. So you're going to have vehicles coming out of all directions onto Baldon Lane, and at peak times it is going to be absolutely diabolical there. My second point is on page 88, 5.15. The NHS advised that the impact of the care home development is a workforce impact and not infrastructure, as the residents do not attend primary community health care facilities, and as such the NHS do not generally request infrastructure contributions. Well, are the care home providers actually going to have doctors on site 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? Are they going to have nursing staff on site 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to deal with any emergencies that may come up with residents? If not, why are we not asking for contributions towards NHS care? Because as far as I'm aware, even in care homes, most of the residents are registered with a GP somewhere along the line, and the two nearest GPs, which are London Road Medical Centre and I believe the Meads would be the next closest, they're both oversubscribed and their books are closed. So I'm not sure where these people are going to get their healthcare from. And I think Councillor Bonney and Councillor Baldock have talked about the ecology and that so much, but the countryside gap, we've had that in Baldon, between Baldon and Sittingbourne, so eroded recently, not least with the 290 houses on Ufton Court Farm, which have taken away a massive gap, and we're likely at some point in the near future, I suspect, get another application come in to build on the rest of that site, however many houses that might be. We've got the next application before us on under 2.4 for 38 houses there, which are taking up two other fields where people keep horses, and I think Councillor Kavanagh might mention something more about the equestrian position there. So we're losing even more countryside gap than we've already got. I'm reluctant to say that I would look at refusing this application, but yeah, I do not like it one little bit.
Thank you, Councillor. Just for people and members, let's not stray into other agenda items, please. Let's keep it with the one we're looking at. That's the only one we're allowed to make a judgment on. The others may be relevant, but that's not how we do business. Councillor Winklis.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I had the same concerns as Councillor Clark brought up about the visibility of the access road coming onto Baldon Lane if we're minded to pass this tonight. I've lived in this area for 40 odd years. I lived in Sydney for 40 odd years. I know the area well, very well in fact. So I have grave concerns on that visibility. The second point on it though, I'm going to be quite honest about this in my viewpoint. This has been basically overgrown orchards for many years. I understand what the other council brought up about the ecology and the wildlife, but this is no orchard that is bearing fruit. This is an overgrown, basically, site. So I'll listen to the rest of the debate before I make my mind up on it. I've got an open mic at the moment. That's my points. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Weeklis. Carly, do you want to deal with those two, please? Then we've got another 4 speakers.
Yep, and I think Councillor Bonney had asked how we're dealing with the mitigation for the wildlife, the connectivity. It is through condition 17. We'd get further details of that. Whether you consider that sufficient or not is for you to judge. In terms of the access, I'm not an expert. KCC Highways have been consulted. They haven't raised an objection. 7.9.5 sets out how the access will be altered to create the visibility displays, which they consider to be sufficient to not be dangerous. So that's why that's considered acceptable from an officer point of view. And in terms of the NHS contributions, we did push the NHS on it because we hadn't got a response from them, and we did expect something that might come forward, but their view is that because they're not requiring primary care, they don't. Well, I don't know that maybe it's not sufficient that in terms of the primary care visitation that they don't ask for contributions on that. So that was their response. And if we can't demonstrate a need and it be necessary and meet the tests, we can't just ask for a contribution.
Thank you. Councillor Kavanagh and then Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Chairman. First, buses. I think I'm probably the bus expert in the room as I don't drive. Although there is a bus stop in Adelaide Drive, it is only for school buses. I don't think it will be very helpful with the care home. The closest bus stop will be by what was the King's Head in London Road, which is about 0.7 mile away. Possible contamination can be dealt with by condition. Previously, I've said at this committee that I'm not an expert on badgers, so need to listen to the experts. Despite being criticised for this on Facebook, I will repeat this. If our statutory consultees can find a way forward, we as councillors must listen to this. I know it's frustrating that as councillors we're not allowed to have sight of the badger survey. It's nuts, but it is as it is. However, therefore again, I will have to rely on the official report. It does talk about a walkthrough on the 3rd of June. So it sounds like this time they have been on site regardingly. Interestingly, yesterday, a resident told me of a group of badgers moving very near to another care home in Borden, long after the care home was built. Therefore, I can see both could live together. Both of my parents spent the last few years of their life in older care homes with very little outside green space. There was no choice. Spaces were hard to find. Care homes can't accommodate all sorts of problems common with older people. You have to get the right one. I'm glad to see the move towards providing a better green environment for both residents and workers. Today, I heard of a local resident unable to leave hospital due to no suitable care home space. I know none of us want to lose more green space, but this could, I think, possibly be a good place for older residents. Thank you.
Thank you, and Councillor Kavanagh. Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a transport specialist, the major concern that I've got is the adequacy of parking, particularly for a care home. The staff that need to park, not all, obviously some of them will share, some of them may take some other way to get there, but obviously visitors, and then you've got the professionals that come in, because obviously there aren't doctors on site or nurses or anything like that. So if there are problems in a care home, it's the adequacy of parking that I think is my major concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor MacDonald. Carly, please.
Yes, parking is addressed in 7.9.7 and 7.9.8. There's an over-provision of 7 spaces, so it's above what our standards require, and therefore it's considered sufficient. Thank you.
Councillor Kavanagh, did you have a question? I didn't hear a question. I think it was more. Okay, cool. Let's move on. I have Councillor Ben Martin and then Councillor James Hunt, please.
Thank you, Chair. First off, I don't want to repeat what anyone else has said. So yes, it is a balance, but we can see from when we get to the appeal decisions where the planning inspector is putting balance at the moment. And that has to guide us to an extent. With regard to this one, from my reading of the report, the access doesn't matter at the moment because that is not under consideration. It is the principle of the development. All matters reserved, including access, layout, etc., etc., etc. So we are down to the principle of the development, the ecology, and the living standards for those that will be in there. With that in mind, and I do sympathise with those that have spoken before and will not repeat there on the other, I would like to suggest that we add a condition if we are minded to pass this, and that's around overheating provision. The suggestion would be that no development above ground level shall commence until a detailed overheating prevention strategy for the proposed care home has been submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority. The strategy must demonstrate how the development will minimise overheating risk for current and future climate scenarios in accordance with the NPPF. The strategy to include passive design measures, building fabric performance, mechanical systems if proposed, occupant comfort and health, climate change resilience, dynamic thermal modelling and post-occupancy evaluation, with the reason being to ensure the proposed care home minimises overheating risks, safeguarding occupant health and well-being and promoting sustainable development and climate change adaptation in accordance with NPPF paragraphs 152, 163 and 185. Do you want me to send it via Teams?
Councillor Martin, you've caught us on the hop with that. There's probably 3 people in the room that will know that. Do you want to answer that now, Ian?
Can do, Chairman.
Please.
The fundamental approach to applying conditions is that they need to be necessary to make the development acceptable. We've got approved document O of the building regulations relates to overheating, and so we don't think it would be necessary to make the development acceptable.
Do you want to reconsider, Councillor Martin?
So the reason that I'm putting that in is that Part O, yes, does deal with overheating to an extent, but we have seen with buildings that have been granted conditions and have been approved under Part O that further down the line they suffer with significant overheating. We're seeing that at care homes that have been built as recently as 2 years ago. Canterbury House in Faversham. We're seeing it back on the Abbey Fields care home, which is run by Southern Housing. If Part O is not doing what it's supposed to be doing, we need to be looking out to protect the future residents of this. It is residential amenity, and I think it is well needed.
I understand that, and I hear that, and I endorse that. This is an outline application. I think the officers can take your spirit and perhaps discuss that further with the applicant to ensure that the majority of what you're calling for, and we don't get everything we ask for, unfortunately, can be agreed.
If we can get delegated authority, if it were to be approved, if you were able to send us that list, what we can do is look at that and compare that with what's on the building regulations and see what we can incorporate into the planning process, and discuss that with the applicant. Any problems, then we'll just come back to committee, but otherwise, if you're okay with delegated authority for us to amend that condition, 26 could be amended or it could be included as a separate one.
Yep, let's get there first, shall we? Thank you, Carly. Councillor Hunt and then finally Councillor Bowen.
Thank you. I think it was mentioned about statutory consultees that we have to listen to. But we have seen a number of times where statutory consultees are wrong, and I think that should be considered. I'm not too happy that I agree that this is all done on the balance, but we're needing to make a decision this evening, and I don't think we've got the right information to be able to make that decision, because I think there is a fine line of where the balance goes with this one, and there is a lot here about the priority habitat. It goes through in the report and says that almost one point says it doesn't matter because it's been unmanaged land and the trees are dead or dying. But I don't know. I've had dealings with orchards, and in particular the noble chafer beetle, which actually lives on dead or dying trees. They don't live on trees that are growing and healthy. And I don't know whether those have been picked up in the reports that are mentioned. And obviously if KCC Ecology are looking at that, how do we know as decision makers whether that's been picked up or not? And I don't believe it probably has been done. I also don't think that putting some land in Faversham is good enough. That does seem to be a long way, and I'd rather be seeing detail of whether land closer has been looked at. How have they come up with land in Faversham with different landowners? And also I've seen these applications come along, especially with care homes, where someone gets the application, gets approval, and then they go out to the market to sell it for a company to come in. And that also raises issues with land ownership and how they're going to deal with this mitigation. So without further detail, unless officers can tell us tonight exactly what has been done in those surveys, are we absolutely adamant that as a priority habitat, every single thing has been checked on here, and the people that need to be, especially the People's Trust of Endangered Species, are one that deal with these sorts of things, have they been included? And if we can get that checked, and for us as a committee to know those details, we can go forward. But at the moment, I can't see that we can.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. I'll come back to one of your comments in a moment after we've heard from Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, I'm not going to repeat a lot of what's been said. Some very, very good comments, I think, on this one. And it is, as people said, it's a fine balance on this. Yes, we are in need. We have an ageing population. It says that in the report. We may be getting older, but that does not necessarily mean our health and well-being is improving at the same time. And a distance of 0.7 miles has been referenced in terms of a nearest bus stop. In terms of, I'm thinking about the potential age demographics for a nursing home. 0.7 miles for somebody with respect to them of over 60, 70 or 80 years old could easily be a real challenge, or nigh on impossible for them to actually use. And that brings me back to the point that Councillor MacDonald made. I have concerns in terms of the car parking. 29 parking spaces for a 70-bed nursing home, but that doesn't say how many staff and how many parking spaces will be taken up by staff, therefore reducing the number of spaces available for family, friends and loved ones. That's a concern. I'm not hugely familiar with the area itself, but I'm going to assume that the road leading up to this particular area as a country lane is, I'm guessing, national speed limit. But correct me if I'm wrong on that. And I'm thinking if it is a 60 mile an hour speed limit into an area where there's a care home, would need to be checked. If I'm wrong, then that it's 30. Thank you very much. I withdraw that then. I didn't know. But I do, as much as I do share that we do need healthcare, I also agree with Councillor Baldock and other speakers. I'm disappointed. I know Councillor Martin mentioned it in terms of the design, that we have the parking area butting onto a conservation area, and you've got a protected area in front of it. Well, that to me is the wrong way round. Would it not have been better to have the parking area to the front and actually keep having more of a protected area leading into a conservation area to the rear? So I'm disappointed in that. I don't think that serves any purpose. And in terms of the other areas, in terms of the wildlife, I do understand it. It does give me great uncertainty that we are actually doing the right thing if we agree this potentially tonight when there's a lot of questions still outstanding. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Bowen. Yeah, a couple of points. I'll be careful how I word it. Councillor Hunt, yes, it has been said this evening this is a finely balanced application. Members will be very aware. You didn't use the word deferral, I just did. You'll be very well aware of, should this committee choose to do that, there is potential for the applicant to go for non-determination on a timescale point of view. So be very careful, please, about that one. As has been said before, we are here to make decisions. If you feel there's a majority that there's not enough information, if you feel there's a majority, then I'm guided by you. I'm just doing the job to keep everybody in order. Sorry, Carly, do you want to come back to those, Councillor Bowen and Councillor Hunt first?
Yep, I can do. In terms of, I can't guarantee that everything's been looked at in terms of ecology because I'm not an ecologist, but KCC Ecology have looked at it. I do know that they would look at the type of habitat that's there and what that may well support in terms of species. So, you know, I've worked alongside KCC Ecology for over 20 years, so they do look at that as a whole. So they would highlight if there was anything missing. So that's as much as a guarantee I can give you in terms of what's been looked at. In terms of the site at Faversham and what the applicant has considered in terms of alternatives, this is probably going to come up a lot actually with BNG. The hierarchy is that in an ideal world it would be on site, but if it can't be on site, it's off site, and that needs to be as close as possible. But if it isn't, it can be elsewhere. And then what that means for the developers in these cases, or alternatively, the last sort of stop is that they buy credits and don't actually provide habitat anywhere. They pay money to the government and they do it. So this is probably going to be a situation that comes up in the future. So yes, they've got this site in Faversham and they will need to provide it. So we don't require them to look at other options. If they are providing it and then it is secured, then that fits with the provisions of the BNG legislation and they're compliant with it. And I think just in terms of parking spaces, it's set out in 7.9.7 how the numbers have been reached in terms of the number of spaces and how many are for staff and how many are for visitors, and that's set out in the council's SPD. And then obviously there's the additional 7 on top of that. Thank you.
Thank you. And I believe the road is 30 miles an hour, is it?
Yeah.
It is. Thank you. Right, we've done. Just hold on. I mentioned the apple. The apple's now been eaten. We're on apple 2, and I've got 4 people. I'm only going to take in the sequence that I saw them. Yep. Councillor Baldock, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Bonney, and then Councillor Clark, and then that is it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Brief as well, please.
Yep. The officer was going to come back to refer to where in here this particular report there's consideration of other appeal decisions. Now we've heard a lot about this is outline and things can change, but when things come back at detailed, well, we're told, well, that's what was in the outline permission that was agreed. So it's, that chicken and egg that we're always told, it's only outline, we can change things. detailed comes in, well, that's what was agreed at outline. So I'm always really wary of that because we never seem to get the changes that we wanted. Equally, we don't have to accept their offer. This is a balanced decision, and their BNG offer, if we don't think it's adequate, that just counts into balance against it. You know, we don't have to accept anything that they offer if we don't think it improves the balance. But it may be an idea for us as a council to try and identify areas that potentially could be used in the future so that we could get better results. The idea that badgers are happy moving close to old people's homes and that they're all happy to coalesce. What's happening in Borden is the amount of development and the amount of badger sets that are being disturbed are forcing those badgers to try and locate anywhere. And on the periphery in 3 areas are care homes. That's why they're going near care homes, because they're being forced there. We're actually losing badger numbers quite considerably due to the number of sets that have been damaged. So I think the idea that they're moving there out of choice really doesn't reflect the reality. And I'd also be concerned, would we agree this if it was for residential, if it was for private homes? Because once we give the principle of development, that's it. We've said it's acceptable. And there's nothing to stop somebody getting the principle in place, coming along and then saying, well, you agreed a care home, but we'd rather put 50 houses there or 20 houses.
Councillor Border, I'm going to stop you there. Okay, this is not a development for residential. It's not a petrol station. It's not a fast food takeaway. Okay, let's keep it on track, please.
Okay, it's just what it becomes, if it's permitted, it becomes that land use. So I just think this is quite what I've heard actually to me indicates the balance is even further against it. And we never really got an explanation as to why they think putting cars next to a nature reserve and having the biggest impact on wildlife, why that's been done, because that must have been discussed in the discussions. Why is it that it's not at the front, and would we realistically be able to change that at detail is my big concern.
Thank you very much. Councillor Thompson.
Yes, just that there are other sites. That's the key thing to remember. There are other sites. But going back to appeals, there's been 3, just quickly looking up, that, funny enough, one of them was an approval in a green gap between 2 areas. And then that was overturned on appeal by the Secretary of State. So even though it's given permission by its local authority, it was overthrown. And so I feel that we should defend our green gaps vigorously because they're disappearing fast, and Borden's identity will go with that. I think we need to look at the wildlife as well. There are other sites. That's the key thing here. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bonney, then Councillor Clark.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I've heard everything. I did forget to talk about the NHS, which is rather silly of me. And thank you for the officer for the clarification. It says in the report, the NHS do not generally request infrastructure contributions. But what the NHS's own document at the ICB says, that they will, in 7.3 of their own document, NHS, Kent and Meadow will take a consistent approach to assessing the need for developer contributions, but the specific circumstances will be considered on its own merit. Well, that doesn't sound like their sentence in the report. Sounds like it's on its own merit. It will provide evidence that requested contributions, etc., are required. It is where anticipated population growth from a development will contribute towards negative impacts to the current population's healthcare facilities and experience. And I think that absolutely is the case. I think anyone who lives in Sittingbourne will know, having one of the worst GP ratios in the country, and there is no plan for a new GP service for the existing and incoming ones. We've just had an enormous debate at Highstead Park and a public inquiry about this, and the NHS, ICB, have changed their mind about 3 times. And it's got to go out there in the public so that the public understand that they're in a mess, they don't really know what they're asking for, and they're clearly in a mess and don't know what they're asking for on this. But it'd be deeply unfair for us on the planning committee tonight to make a decision and say it's okay to permit an outline for a development that will put a strain on the local NHS facilities. That is without doubt, because I don't know of a single care home where they've not required a GP to attend, or nursing, the community nursing teams, etc. I think anyone who's tried to contact the community nursing teams will know it's a nightmare. Yes, they will have their own service, but they don't have their own dedicated geriatric service, as I understand it. Now, it is imperative that any additional residential development, be it a care home or housing, contributes to our NHS services locally, I think. So there is absolutely no way, in my mind, I could support in this finely balanced scheme going forward without some sort of contribution to the NHS, or to at least have had a proper, thorough discussion with the ICB as to why they feel that's not valid and a published reason for that.
Thank you, Councillor Bonney. Finally, Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Just one brief one first. Whilst I concur with your fact that we take each individual application on its merits, what I was saying earlier is it is perfectly acceptable to look at the cumulative effect of the loss of green spaces and the effect on highways. So that's that point. My question to the officers is, because I'm still not sure which way this is going to go, if we were looking to defer this, what is the cut-off date for notification or for approving or refusing this application? Thank you.
Carly, please.
The decision is due to be issued by the 25th of July, so next week.
So you can see, Councillor Clark, it's not only finely balanced in terms of planning, it's finely balanced in terms of timing. Okay? Right. We have our legal representative online. Please, over to you.
Just to clarify to the committee that it's been mentioned that it's a very fine balance that you have here when applying the tilted balance, the tilted test, the tilted balance. It's not, in fact. For clarity, you have to, in order to reject this application, in applying the test, you have to show that the harm of the development is substantial and can be demonstrated, to put it in simple terms, over and above what is the benefit. And so it's quite a high test. You have to show that there is, a great deal stacked against this application. Now, a lot has been said. Some things which have been said have not been material considerations. For example, it was mentioned that the ownership issue was mentioned about the site, about how the applicant could get planning permission and then just sell it on. That's not a material consideration. We have to take the application as it is. So when you do, it is your decision. When you do apply the test, you have to see that it's got to be a lot of evidence which is stacked in terms of the harm as compared to the benefit of this particular application. And the appeal decisions have been mentioned. Appeals are only guidance. Each matter has to be dealt on its own facts. So the fact that previously some decision might have said that a particular piece of land was very beneficial and therefore the appeal was granted doesn't necessarily mean that that would apply in this particular case.
Thank you very much. You've stolen some of my thunder, but I'm happy to continue. We've heard a lot this evening about the countryside gap. Some members here will know that I fought very hard to protect a countryside gap. Very hard. And despite my protestations, I failed. So that's another area within Swell that has lost its countryside gap. It hurts. I tell you, it hurts. We've heard a number of speakers, alleged experts on highways, on badgers, and even buses. And we need to take that. We need to take the advice. We need to take that specialist advice, which has been sought. That specialist advice about highways, about ecology, about badgers, about everything else, you can see it for yourself, is in the report. If you wish to challenge that, you're very brave. It's been done before and it's been successful. It's been done before and it's been unsuccessful. So be very careful who and what you challenge. Because tonight, ladies and gentlemen, you are members of a council. You're not professional highways, badger experts, or even bus experts. Carly, is there anything else you wish to say?
Just to say that it is in outline, and the drawings that would be approved, if it were to be approved, it would be secured by condition, and that is just the red outline and the retained traditional orchard at the front and the construction buffer zone. So there is potential for the applicant to switch the parking around if members wanted that. If it's granted, I'm talking about, obviously, we've got to get to that point. But yeah, that's the only thing that is secured in terms of any layout on the site, and an indication. I suspect the access probably is going to be where it is, but there's certainly potential to change the car park with the position of the building.
Thank you. With that in mind, this will come back to this committee as a full application.
It would come back as a reserved matters.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, okay, let me speak for the committee then. I think Carly and Ian have certainly heard a lot of the bias that people have put forward. They've heard the commentary with regards to access. I know your comment, Carly. They've heard commentary with regards to parking. They've heard commentary with regards to the infrastructure, the fauna, the birds, the trees, the badgers, etc. I would like to think that Carly and Ian, in their capacity, the client is clearly on board somewhere tonight, can discuss some of those areas of concern with the client. I think it's critical, and again, the NHS, as you say, Councillor Bonney. So some of those really key areas can be captured, I would suggest, in that full application. Are you happy to do that in your capacity?
Thank you, Chairman. In terms of, there wouldn't be a full application. We've got an outline application before us, and if it's approved, then we move on to a reserved matters application. We haven't got a full. I'm not entirely clear on what was being asked, but if you're referring to a deferral, if you wanted us to go away and talk to the applicant and work this up into an alternative scheme, then we'd be happy to have those conversations. If you're talking about an approval that grants planning permission for the care home, the detail of it and how that would look in the reserved matters is entirely up for grabs and is to be subject to the parameter plans. It can come forward in countless different ways. The point of access would stay fixed because the outline is required to show the point of access. Even if access isn't approved, it's still required to show where it is. So that is fundamentally going to stay in that position unless the non-material amendment came in. Does that address?
The NHS.
In terms of the NHS contribution, we can by all means talk to the NHS. Of course we can. We always do. The point that I'd have at this stage is that we have, and they've not asked for anything. And for a contribution to meet the SEAL tests, it has to be necessary to make development acceptable. That hasn't come from the NHS. What we've heard is understood. I have my own personal experiences with the NHS, and I'm not going to argue with you. That being said, that's my experience is anecdotal. I know not everyone in this room is, because they're closer to the NHS than I am, but we haven't got an evidence base before us to demonstrate that a contribution is required, because the NHS themselves are saying they don't want a contribution.
Okay. Members, that has been proposed, that has been seconded, and I believe that's been discussed at length. Can I please now have those in favour of the application as it stands, please show. That is 2. 3. Any advance on 3? No. Those against? That is 1. Please, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Those abstaining? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6. That is then not allowed, not approved. Legal, please.
There is provision in the Constitution in a situation such as this, where a decision has been made against officer recommendation, and the committee has a choice to defer the matter so that officers can come back and a full decision given, or to adjourn very briefly for the officers to go away and come back for reasons and grounds why the decision might have been made. So there is a choice for the committee here.
Thank you. I'll make that decision. We will adjourn for... Defer first. That's a good call. If this committee is actually now minded to refuse, I would ask reasons for refusal, and be careful how you word your reasons for refusal. Councillor Baldock.
Well, I would offer up, I think that the erosion of a countryside gap is of significant harm and doesn't outweigh the benefits that this will supply. I think that this is an inappropriate location for this kind of development, or indeed any kind of development, and it is there's a word of not an imposement in the rural area, but there's a phrase that I think Carly will probably pick up and correct me. And that there is inadequate evidence available to this committee to feel confident that there is satisfactory steps being taken to maintain wildlife.
You done? Okay. 15 minutes? 5 minutes. Councillor Hunt, please.
Thank you. I am just trying to come to the point, but we already have in the report towards the end, if I can find it, and it's where it talks about the balance. Sorry, where has it gone? Carly might be able to point me to it. We talk about the balance, and it does say in there that it is against some of the policies. And I think it's those policies that we should be concentrating on. Carly?
You got those, Carly?
Is it 7.17.8 you're looking at?
That is the one.
Fabulous.
That was my thinking on it, that obviously there is a balance. We're talking about those policies and it is in conflict with those policies. I think what we're saying is that there isn't enough information there. There is conflict with those policies, and therefore we see the balance different to what officers have found it.
Okay. What I was going to do is have a break anyway. We'll combine the break with a recess. Back here, please, at 5 to 9 as per your watches. So that's... What?
Can we actually take a break before we've taken a vote? Sorry, Constitution.
No, you're having a break, and in that break, the officers will discuss this. Then we'll come back, then we'll vote.
We've already voted. What are we voting on then?
We'll hear the advice from the officer. Okay. The meeting is now put into recess for 10 minutes. Thank you. Members, please. Thank you for that, members. I know it's hot. I know we've got a lot to get through, but please bear with us. And thank you for that short break. Okay. Yes, quite rightly so. We did just vote, members of the public. However, now we need to understand a different point of view, which is a reason for refusal. So I will be looking for a proposal for refusal, but after we've heard from Ian, it may influence what you need to say, whoever wants to say it. So Ian, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Based on everything that we've heard and the balanced exercise that was done before in the report and what was quoted, we've got two potential reasons for refusal. The proposed development, by virtue of its position outside the built-up area boundaries of the Swale Borough, would conflict with the Council's settlement strategy. Moreover, development at this site, however it is brought forward, would conflict with the purposes of the important local countryside gap. Furthermore, the proposal would result in the inadequately justified loss of best and most versatile agricultural land. The proposal is therefore unacceptable and contrary to policies ST1, ST3, DM25, DM31 of the local plan and the MPPF. The second reason being the proposed development would result in the loss of priority habitat, and it has not been demonstrated to the satisfaction of the local planning authority that the proposed development would not have a detrimental impact on protected species at and within the vicinity of the site. The proposal is therefore unacceptable, contrary to policy CP7 and DP28 of the local plan and the MPPF.
Thank you, Ian. Councillor Baldock.
I notice there is, not the issue that has been mentioned about the uncertainty over wildlife. Is there a way that we will still be able to raise that at an appeal? Also, just so that it's been mentioned in the meeting, under policy ST3, which Ian mentioned, ST35, such locations, development will not be permitted unless supported by national policy and where it would contribute to protect the intrinsic value, setting, tranquility and beauty of the countryside, its buildings and the vitality of rural communities. I know it's in the policy, I think it's just handy to actually have said it in the meeting.
The Chairman, I think the fact that we've referred to the spatial settlement strategy is sufficient, and we'll be drawing on that if this were to go to appeal.
Members, that is the proposal for refusal. Is that seconded? That is seconded, Councillor Bonney. Thank you. To the vote. All those in favour of the proposal to refuse this application and the reasons as outlined by Ian, please show. This is in favour of refusal. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Those against the proposal? None. So there must be a load of abstentions. Who's abstaining, please? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So therefore the reason for refusal is now accepted. Thank you very much indeed. Moving on. Thank you. Thank you. Agenda item 2.4. This is number 24-503677-full. This is land at Riddles Road, Sittingbourne. We have some speakers on this again, but before we have that, I would like to have the officers' update, and we have a small presentation, please.
Of course, Chair. Thank you very much. We are staying in Borden, but we're moving to the south. The application is land off Riddles Road. The application proposes 30 dwellings, including 40% affordable housing, 2 access points, open space with natural play area and associated infrastructure. Before I move to the presentation, there are a few updates to members. Since publication of the report, we have received a new drawing from the applicant that proposes installation of PV solar panels within every single house. PV panels are now integral to the application that hasn't been included before, so officers recommend that the amendment to condition number 12 is included to incorporate reference to that specific drawing and ensure delivery of solar panels, should that be the recommendation that committee reaches today. Now, secondly, just some clarification points relating to the officer's report. So first page of the report does include reference to car park for allotment users. That is to be deleted as it was included incorrectly. It is an element of the scheme that was proposed originally with the application, but since was removed from the proposal, and that's how the report is structured and assesses the development. So all other sections of the report do not refer to that element of the scheme because it's simply not part of the proposal anymore. Another update is update to paragraph 785 and 786 of the committee report, where a word "not" was missed out from the assessment. This is to clarify the landscape visual assessment was not independently assessed. It was assessed by officers, and that resulted in a feedback to the applicant and revisions to the application that achieved reduction in scale of the development by 7 houses. And then lastly, it is also just for clarity, make sure that this is picked up on. The application was assessed against the Kent Minerals and Waste Local Plan. No conflict arises due to the loss of brick earth, as the extraction of materials at this scale would not be viable, and that is a view that was endorsed by KCC Minerals team, which raised no objection to the application. So that's the end of the update. And now, moving on, here is the red line plan showing the application. So you can see here that we have 2 parcels of land that are surrounded by existing development. To the north, we have built-up area of Sittingbourne, and to the south, we have a rural village of Borden. And the site is also situated within the important local countryside gap. Now we can see the aerial view of the site. The local countryside gap is controlled through policy DM25 of the local plan. In terms of the layout of the development, here is what is proposed. So we can see here that we will, the proposal on the table is to have residential development spread across 2 parcels and retain level of separation centrally, although very clearly the gap is reduced in half as a result of that encroachment of the built form of the development. There are orchards that are incorporated within the frontage of the site and within the setting of the listed building. The report does identify that there is a less than substantial harm at the lower level as a result of the encroachment of new buildings within the setting of the listed building that has been determined to be at the lower level. And there is also another listed building named Posiers within the Ribbon development to the south along Borden Lane, and within the village of Borden. There is historical relationship between that building in terms of land ownership, and there is less than substantial harm arising from the proposed development to that building as well. So as we clearly see, the site is within the greenfield, so the development conflicts with policies SD3, DM31 and DM25. It is a planning balance judgment and question whether there are material considerations that would outweigh the harm arising from the development, and against the harm identified and conflict with the policies, we have provision of housing development, 38 homes, and secondly, we have over provision of affordable housing proposed within the development that you're deciding today. So the blended rate as a result of Afton Court appeal that was lost and allowed. The blended rate that would apply here to the policy would be 26%. The proposal is to deliver 40% affordable housing, so relying on the quantum, that would mean that 5 additional affordable housing would be required, would be delivered as a result. Now, in terms of the proposed dwelling mix, here we can see that there is majority of 4-bed dwellings located to the south, but there is also provision of smaller houses to provide a level of variety. But the dwelling mix was also a result of the design approach to provide that different character of the build form between both parcels. Now here we can see the street scene, and that is parcel adjoining Sittingbourne area, and the edge house, the last house defining the edge of the urban area, and that is the view of the proposed development as a when constructed. Of course, the street scene, so you can see 2 houses with an access right next to the existing dwelling, and then further beyond there is open space that will be retained as such, with a provision of walkways. Then here we can see the existing edge of the Sittingbourne area again, just a close-up version, and that would be the proposed street scene. So you can see majority of dwellings are 2-story in scale, but there is also 1 pair of bungalows to meet that need for single-story houses. And we can see the definition that this would provide to the edge of the urban area. Now that is looking towards Sittingbourne from Borden Village. So here we have last house facing the countryside gap. Here is the view towards the house from a different perspective, and that is the street scene along Borden Lane that we could experience. Of course, the landscaping is taken away from the street scene to provide a clear picture, but in there will be a buffer, landscaping buffer in between the road and the proposed houses as shown on the layout here. So balancing all the consideration, the question is whether there would be adverse impacts that would significantly outweigh the benefits of the scheme, and with all the benefits arising from the proposal, together with over provision of affordable housing, office's consideration and conclusion is that the balance is in favour of the scheme, and on this basis the proposal is to grant permission subject to Section 106 agreement and conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Okay, we have some speakers. Can I please first invite Councillor Lee Small for representing Borden Parish Council. Thank you, Lee. 3 minutes when you press your button. Thank you.
First of all, thank you very much for allowing me to speak twice to you in the same evening, councillors. Borden Parish Council have objected to this application and the following points. The layout of the social housing, loss of the countryside gap, the loss of wildlife habitat and the sustainability of this development. First point of our objection is there is a lack of integration within the design of this development. All of the proposed social housing is on the north side, which doesn't promote social integration. The second point, I'm sorry to say yet again, is loss of the countryside gap. This site is virtually opposite the last application that you've discussed tonight. A landscaped area in between that's been proposed is not, does not form or retain a countryside gap. The application conflicts with policy DM25 for the local plan, which states that within these gaps, unless allocated for development by the local plan, planning permission will not be granted for development that would undermine one or more of their purposes. This development just isn't in the local plan. Also, building on agricultural land should only be granted when there is an overriding need. In Borden, there is no such need, with both the Wises Lane and Manor Farm developments providing a large number of new properties. The introduction of buildings within the application site leads to a level of impact that is harmful to the setting and urbanises a semi-rural village. It effectively removes the countryside gap between Sittingbourne and Borden and will have a detrimental impact on the Grade 2 listed properties in the area. The third point is regarding the ecology and biodiversity net gain documents submitted by the applicant. These documents contain a number of inaccuracies and omissions. The ecology document states, for instance, that the badgers are known to be present within Borden Nature Reserve. This is untrue. It's impossible. Borden Nature Reserve is an ex-landfill site with a very small level of topsoil covering the rubbish. Impossible for badgers to dig. The report also fails to mention or take into account the extensive badger sets that are less than 300 metres away from the application site and that are now using the land and the adjoining allotments for foraging since the start of Ufton Court development. This brings into question the accuracy and completeness of the report you'll be using to help decide the application today. The fourth and final point is access to services and travel. These are key to a successful development and community. Swellborough Council have already stated on the planning portal for this application there is a lack of public transport and have recommended that further consideration be given to the public transport links for this development. This has not been taken into account and in fact conflicts with policy DM6, which prioritises the integration of facilities for walking and cycling into the location. The nearest bus stop is around 1 kilometre away, 13-minute walk, and has very few active bus routes, the most frequent of which is 1 bus per hour. In our opinion, this is not a sustainable development. It removes the countryside gap that is laid out very clearly in the Swell local development plan, and it changes the nature of the location to its detriment. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Lee. Can I ask, please, Sarah Booker? Sarah, please. No. Please take the seat. You have a button on left and right. Press the left button. Your time will start. You have 3 minutes. Thank you very much.
So I'm speaking today on behalf of the residents of Borden Lane, and I live at 195 Borden Lane, which is neighbouring this proposed land. My first objection is the loss of the countryside gap. The development is contrary to policy DM25 of the Swell Borough Local Plan in 2017, and it would be further eroding the countryside gap and lead to the merger of Sittingbourne and Borden. The Planning Committee published the Swell Independent Local Countryside Gaps Review in February 2025. The Planning Committee's recommendation was that the gap is largely retained at its current extent to avoid the coalescence of Sittingbourne and Borden. They discussed the Ufton Court Farm development and the new road junction between Wises Lane and Cryles Lane, reducing the gap, and felt currently this was maintained as there was a strong sense of leaving one settlement and walking to another. This identifies there is already a small gap, and this development is proposed on the only countryside gap between Borden and Sittingbourne. The continued separation between Borden and Sittingbourne is a crucial component of setting and allowing the historic plan of the settlement to be preserved. The Ufton Court Farm development is only a small distance from this proposed development, and only the allotments that border the proposed development separate the two, which are designated green space rather than a countryside gap. This is a strategic decision that should not be made through the local plan process and not through development propelled by a lack of housing land supply, and is seen by the residents and as abuse of the process. The recommendation of Mr Webster, one of Swell's planning officers from a previous development on Borden Lane, stated Borden is very much linear in nature, largely characterised by a single row of houses fronting Borden Lane. I believe that backland development would detract from this character and appearance. If this development was approved, this clearly shows inconsistency in the decision making within Swell Borough Council's planning department. I haven't circulated photos because the chairman has not allowed me to, but it is very clear from these photos that were submitted as part of my original objection. They show the view into my main living room, my master bedroom, and this is from plots 8, 9, 10 and 11. The fact that the planning officer felt the need to black out my image on the planning portal shows how intrusive these houses will be, having direct sight into all of my main living spaces. The photos were taken on an iPhone 11 with no zoom. Planning permission on our property 4 years ago was initially rejected due to the proposed windows on the upper floor of our extension, citing privacy of our neighbours being the reason. They have no windows facing our property, just a utility room door. We cannot see into their property at all. Approving this development would demonstrate further inconsistencies within Swales planning approval, and I urge you to reject the planning proposal. The other summaries I have identified are the provision of utilities and lack of drainage. Southern Water has significant issues with drainage locally, with drains frequently overflowing on Borden Lane. Thames Water routinely cites difficulties with treating tap water for usage due to increasing housing demand. Healthcare limitations in Swale. The ecology impact. The Riddles development cannot achieve like-for-like net biodiversity gain on a site, another lost habitat for pollinators, mammals and birds of prey. The estate is detrimental to the character of the area and it impacts on all listed buildings. A complete lack of public transport and the lack of education provision in what is clearly deemed to be a family estate.
Thank you, Mrs. Booker. The reason for not allowing the photos, we don't allow any tabled items at the meeting. Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Baldock, do you wish to speak at this stage?
Thank you, Chairman. I did have a couple of comments.
Are you speaking at, what are you speaking as?
I'll be speaking as a committee member.
Right, you'll hang on then.
Hang on then.
I'll move the officer recommendation. Is that seconded? Seconded, Councillor Clark. Thank you. Councillor Baldock.
Thank you, Chairman. This is, having heard what I've heard just then, this looks like one of the most potentially devastating proposals to come before this committee. If, as the lady said, it's only February of this year that we reinforced our policy supporting our countryside gaps. This runs a was it Olsen shoe or something? Olsen cart through that entire policy. This would be all that is left between the settlements of Borden and Sittingbourne, and this is basically closing that gap. That little bit of green space does not constitute countryside. It's not going to be used as countryside. It is an open green space in a development. Now, if we're going to allow this, we are basically sending a sign that our policy on the countryside gaps is up for grabs everywhere. And I think we, especially when we just recently reinforced it, we have to be very careful about doing that to our policies. From a wildlife perspective, we have recently been arguing for a wildlife corridor provision in the Ufton Court development. That's because this is a wildlife corridor from Borden Nature Reserve through the allotments into the area of Ufton Court. This puts a residential development on that wildlife corridor. It kills it. If this goes through, there is no realistic, safe way for wildlife from the Borden Nature Reserve to access the land north of Ufton Court. We are basically creating an island, a very big island, that has no way of getting out. We've already heard how wildlife is being forced out by development elsewhere. This stops the main escape route. So I think you have to be really careful when you take that into account. Those are my maiden two concerns. I mean, there is concerns about the lack of provision for horse people. that's becoming an increasing problem. More people are wanting to have horses, less places they can safely, I'm not going to say store them again. Stable them. Well done, sir. And keep them, yes. So I just have real problems with this one. Don't know what other people will think. I'm happy to listen to potential solutions and other comments. But at the moment, I think this just trashes Countryside Gap policy totally. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Clark, then Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chairman. Not to repeat what Councillor Baldock has just said, because I think it was an excellent presentation. Looking through this, I look at that picture up on the screen. There are a lot of things that strike me that are wrong with this development. As Mrs. Booker said, overlooking into her house is a consideration. You've got two separate exits from that development, and one of them comes out, looks like very few metres away from where I presume that is the Wises Lane Spine Road roundabout. And I read on KCC Highways, the proposal introduces two priority junctions designed to a required standard and with sufficient visibility displays. So am I to believe that those two exit roads there are going to be given priority over the main road through to Baldon, the main Baldon Lane? That is a question. I looked through, and I said this again at the Ufton Court inquiry, and this is a cumulative effect. With regards to primary and secondary education, having spoken to the manager at the Minturn Avenue School, they are unable to take any more children into their school without basically not above and beyond what they would normally take from what is current dwellings that are built, without actually knocking down the school and completely rebuilding it with another 5 classrooms. That strikes the same with some of the secondary schools that I've spoken to. They are all oversubscribed, and you look at the amount of money that the Education Authority are looking towards. You're looking at about 375,000 pounds. That is not going to build a new school, let alone put any half decent classrooms on there to allow education for any more dwellings. Special educational needs, £16,000 is going to do nothing for the SEND quota that is needed, and more children are on the spectrum and they do need specialised care. This brings me on then to my last point, I believe, at the moment, the NHS contributions. And as I said previously, both the nearest local GP facilities are oversubscribed and they are not taking any more patients on. The local NHS dentist, they do occasionally open their books, not very often, and it's not very many people they can actually take on. And when you look at the amount that the NHS have asked as a contribution of just under £38,000, which will probably be spread between 10 GP practices in and around Sittingbourne, you can see that that amount of money is going to do absolutely nothing to alleviate the problem that we have at the moment as one of the worst areas in the whole of the United Kingdom for GP to patient ratio. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Councillor Clark. Councillor Thompson, please.
Yeah, I think it's been covered, but I imagine what was adopted in 2025 was the Swale Important Countryside Gaps Luck report, was it? Was that what was adopted? I was just trying to understand. It was, yeah. So within that, it gives fully meets, partially meets, and does not meet. And fully meets is that exact piece of land. So we've basically adopted that countryside gap plan, and that is in it. So therefore, it gives very solid grounds for it not to be accepted if we've already, it contradicts what we've just paid people to consult us to tell. Borden as well, the saturation level of housing, going back to social housing, I think it has an adequate amount of housing coming forward around it, so that's fine. And then back to the aesthetic value of the M25 around the green corridor. It's so important to protect it for people's well-being, peace of mind and identity for their area. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Joe, do you want to answer Councillor Clark's question?
In terms of the access points, the priority junction is T junction, so that means that Borden Lane retains its priority to the proposed access points. And shall I clarify in terms of the community infrastructure contributions? They are evidence-based as per KCC developers' contribution guidance. They are determined on per dwelling basis, and that is consistently applied to each application that we get that is major development application and is viable to pay those contributions.
Thank you, Joe. Councillor Ben Martin and Councillor Bonney.
Thank you, Chair. So looking through the documents, both on the portal and in front of us, the first thing I wanted to point out was with regard to the social and affordable housing, which is put forward and no doubt is one of the benefits that we will be balancing. It does state quite clearly that there is only one registered provider who has made any sort of offer, and that offer is not viable, i.e. they are not offering enough money to the developer for the developers to be able to say, yes, we can afford you to do that. So that needs to be borne out. Yes, there would be negotiation, but how much higher can the RP really go? In terms of the new drawing with the solar panels, I do feel that we have to quantify this ever so slightly. This is not out of the goodness of the developer's heart. This is as a result of the new Part L regulations, which require much higher standards on energy efficiency. Therefore, without solar panels on the roofs, you'd have to have walls around 600 to 700 millimetres thick, as opposed to the standard 3 to 4. It's an awful lot of space that you suddenly start losing if you try to just do it with insulation and fabric first approach. So we have to, yes, it's material that we're going to get the solar, that's wonderful, and, it will help the running costs on the properties, but it is not out of the goodness of any developer's heart. I am undecided on this one at the moment because I can see the benefit, but we do have that policy that was so recently essentially reaffirmed. So it's a real tricky one, and the trouble is we are in the position that we are in with the 5-year land supply and without a local plan, and that's what seems to skybosh us quite a lot and skew us.
Thank you. And Councillor Bonney, please.
Thank you. Can I just ask one question before I say anything else? Is there any kind of viability assessment with this?
There is no viability assessment, no.
Why?
Because there is no need to. There was no viability argument. The development is viable and the applicant is not negotiating contributions. They are actually over-providing on affordable housing, so hence there is no need for viability assessment.
Yep, just checking. Okay. I'll park that thought. Yes, I've got a couple of issues. Not least that we've currently, obviously, the whole discussion about countryside gaps and our recent adoption of a policy, and this just rides a horse and cart through one of those. So that's firstly. And the second one is about layout. And if I just click onto the map. So the top part of this development, as you come down Borden Lane, you've got the last house there, and then you've got this small group of new houses, and then this gap, and then obviously the listed building. They must really hate that neighbour, because what they've done is they've put that service road for that small development right next to that property's boundary. And I'll go back to the Kent Design Guide and talk about designing, and this is a bugbear of mine, as you can tell, my hobby horse. But what we've got is a collection of buildings here where there is this the affordable housing development?
That's mainly
mainly in the north.
The parcel to the north is mainly affordable housing. Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and that is the one that has an access that runs directly against the neighbour's property, effectively on that most northern boundary.
Yeah, that's correct.
You've got really quite a large area here for layout. You've wedged the access road, not you, because it's not your scheme, but the applicant has, right between it and the neighbour. So there'll be traffic coming in and out of this new development right against that existing residence boundary. And I can imagine if I was them, I wouldn't be too pleased either. But if you just look at the way they're laid out, effectively what we've got is just a long cul-de-sac. Because if you look at, I'm looking at the plan which was amended to show how a waste vehicle, refuse vehicle would get in and out. And it's obviously got a reverse. But there's a whole thing about creating a community, having a focal point, you know, the natural security you would get by having properties maybe facing each other, back gardens backing onto, you know, green spaces, etc. I just feel that layout in the north is poor. Then if we head down, obviously we're going to interrupt what is effectively the countryside gap and shrink it down somewhat, and then create this new housing development on the southern bit south of Riddles Road. Is how you get about this sort of, if you look at good estate layout, I don't think that reflects it particularly. You've got the position of back-to-back gardens here, so the only way through is going to be down the side, a narrow gap down the side to get into the rear of gardens. They're going to back onto each other. These properties are kind of all huddled together, overlooking each other. And again, you've got effectively these cul-de-sac views. I just don't like the layout of it. I don't like the fact that we're losing this countryside gap. These are things we hold dear, and that is a particular issue there, because you drive down there, it's a really nice vista as you come out of the village to see that space between that last house in Borden Village, as it were. As you head towards the listed buildings, you can see across the fields, you can see the allotments, etc., and vice versa as you come down Borden Lane. So I just think there's a number of issues here that could have been better resolved, could have been better designed, quite frankly. And continuing on from my earlier point about connectivity of wildlife, effectively that whole southern thing wipes out the ability, as Councillor Baldock said, of the connectivity from the green space on the left-hand side of Borden, well, on the left-hand side of Borden Lane as you drive in towards Sittingbourne, across. I just think it makes a real mockery of it, because these gardens, because of the way they're designed, you've got back-to-back fencing there. So how are you going to realistically condition fencing to allow the permeability of the wildlife through from one area to another, it's just not going to happen, is it, quite frankly?
Thank you, Councillor Bonney. We now have Councillor Braun and then Councillor Winklis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to ask if page 7 could be pulled up, because I wanted to comment on something that Councillor Small said. And along with Councillor Bonney, with the layout of the north site, the fact that all of the affordable housing is up there, I think it shows an utter disregard of people that would be moving into them. Like, reports have shown time and time again that having a mix is the best way to achieve social cohesion, and I just don't know why anyone would design the layout like this.
Councillor Winklis.
Thank you, Chair. I refer to page 129, 2.21, 2.22, 2.23, where there was 3 previous planning applications we turned down on this committee. All 3 we lost on appeal in that, basically that south side of Sittingbourne. I feel, my view is, as much as I don't wish to build on this bit of land, I feel that if we do turn this down, we will lose this as well. And I also see that there's quite a bit they're offering on the 106, and there is the affordable housing aspect to it. So I am possibly going to go with the officer's recommendation on this one for reasons I've just stated. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Chairman. Following on from previous speakers, I mean, this may not necessarily be planning grounds, but I'm going to comment on it anyway. We have a number of, I'm going to say, estates in the borough. Certainly one in my particular ward, which is one application that was separated by a green bit of land, and has evolved into two quite distinct areas within their housing. It doesn't complement as one area. It doesn't complement itself, and it's lovely to see the generic what on here what appears to be pond. It's lovely to see the usual trees and what a fantastic bog standard design that we seem to have on this application. It doesn't complement the area, I don't think. It doesn't complement itself. When you have the northern part, that's almost like the naughty child, go and sit in the corner and do not be seen because we don't want any part of you. This is a local village for local people. Go over there and we'll hide you in the corner and we'll put people's car park spaces by their back gardens, which looks to be really small in comparison to the other part, which looks nice and big, where car parking appears to be to the front and much larger gardens. It really comes across, in my opinion, as a have and have not. And I know that's not planning grounds, but what an uncomplimentary design, I think, on this actual estate. And that's even before you get onto the impact on Borden itself. My final word, I could sum this up on planning grounds as yuck. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Bowen. We need to be careful not to cast too wide a gap between the social housing element. Some of those people living in social housing may be with us this evening. So let's be careful, please, and respectful. Councillor Baldock, I saw your hand. I'll allow you to come back briefly, please.
Yeah, I just think, you've got to look at the cumulative impact of the developments around there. There is a difference between this and some of the appeals. This is in a very condensed area. The countryside gap isn't just being eaten into, it's virtually eliminated. So I think that's what's different with the Afton Court and the other one that is referenced in here, Swans Tree Avenue. So I think that is a difference. But also I just wanted to say, in response to points made by Councillor Braun and Councillor Bowen, we have a policy to spread affordable housing throughout a development. This seems to be another policy that this developer doesn't care about. because it has been basically ghettoised, and I think that's exactly why we have that policy, to stop this sort of development coming forward.
Thank you, Councillor Baldock. Councillor Clark, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Following on from what Councillor Baldock has said, it's been proven in the past with two estates, one in Councillor Hunt's ward and one in Merston ward, where at times the housing associations who owned them, there was no integration whatsoever. Again, the layout, I didn't pick up on that earlier, but the layout is diabolical. There's no integration there at all, and whilst not being a planning consideration, I think it should be said that the applicant should speak to their architects and ask them to design some better buildings, maybe some smaller buildings. We don't need any more executive 4-bedroom shoeboxes. We need affordable house. If this is to go ahead, and I hope it doesn't, we need smaller family homes that people can afford to buy. People in Swale can't afford £500,000 for a 4-bedroom box. They struggle to try and find £250,000 to buy their first house. And as I say, whilst not a planning consideration, it should be considered by applicants when they put in planning applications. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Bonney.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, because I think it's really important, this is a full application. So there is, we are agreeing to the design in this effectively, and we are agreeing to the layout. So when it's an application like this, you are fully within your rights to say, I don't like it, it's not appropriate. I'll go back to the Kent Design Guide, look at the guidance there. It doesn't work. I've got experience in my ward of a new estate that has kind of done exactly this, and it's caused a huge problem. It's an enormous drain on the state, as well as all the neighbours' energy and time and their sanity when things go wrong. And an awful lot of that can be remedied by good design. And what we're saying here is this is not an example of good design. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see no further hands. Joe, do you want to come back to those points, please? Particularly the one about dilution of social housing within.
Yes, so I think it is a fact that affordable housing is clustered within the northern parts of the development, and officers' report acknowledge that it is the situation that we are in. The justification put forward by the applicant is, the reason behind it is the management purposes. Registered providers do prefer to have cluster of affordable housing because it's just easier to manage that, especially on sites that are smaller. And affordable housing officer raised no objection to that arrangement.
Okay, you've heard it. So we've heard about the conservation gap, again, the countryside gap. We've heard about NHS issues again. The big one for me is the segregation. It's 38 houses, not 2,000, thankfully. It's 38 houses. And if the purveyor of the social housing element finds it difficult to get around 38 homes, I'm somewhat gobsmacked by that and quite disappointed. But there we go, that's what we have. This is a full application, so what you see is sometimes what you get. Members, Councillor Martin, really snippy.
It's just on the affordable housing element and the reasons behind them saying that management would be easier having it together. It will be partly because that way land will be set aside to the housing association for maintenance rather than a management company usually, and that's where the ease of management comes in. It's also much easier for a housing association in terms of dealing with antisocial behaviour to do so when the neighbour that's causing the antisocial behaviour is not a private tenant. That's where it becomes difficult, and when it is 15, 20 houses, you do want them together to make that more manageable, because you're not going to put a neighbourhood officer out for 20 houses. They're going to have an area that covers much, much larger. So I hate saying it, but from my personal and professional point of view, that's why they would be looking at that.
Okay, I need to caveat that and say that we certainly do not agree that all antisocial behaviour comes from social housing. That's the first point. You know, you can have a row of multi-million pound houses, lovely environment, and then an undesirable moves in. You know, so let's be very careful. That has been proposed and seconded. Members, please show those in favour of the development as we see it. 1. Don't need to recount that. Those against, please show. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, unlucky for some. Any abstentions, please? 1, 2, 3 abstentions. Okay. Councillor Baldock. Sorry, that is now not approved.
I would be minded to put forward a proposal for refusal on the grounds of loss of countryside gap. I think there has to be a refusal reason on the loss of the wildlife corridor, because I think that is, I don't know how you word that, but I think that is important. I think the layout is contrary to our policies on spreading affordable housing throughout a development, and design and layout. I don't know if anybody wants to add any others, but I think those are the 4 that struck me.
No, I don't want to adjourn. Councillor Hunt.
I don't want to add anything, but what I will say is I think some of the issues that have been raised tonight, I think the committee need to remember that we don't have to go for refusal on it, just because we've turned down the officer recommendation to approve it. I think we should be looking at officers going back to the developer and raising some of the concerns that have been said before we start going down the route of refusal.
Joe, where are we on timing for this? Ian, please.
Through Chair, the application's due for determination on Sunday. The applicant has told us categorically that it will go to non-determination appeal if we don't determine it.
Okay, number one, I hate being threatened. That's a serious thing, you know. Councillor Hunt.
I would say the same. At the end of the day, the developer wants to get something through, and if they're going to work with us to have that chance, whether that will happen or not, they'd be stupid to go to non-determination. So we keep saying about the dates are coming up, but I think it's irrelevant, because at the end of the day, the developer can agree to move that date forward. And if they're wanting to work with us because there is concerns, then that date, say, is irrelevant. So.
I repeat the same comment I made earlier, that we are here to make decisions. It's either approved or it's not approved. I'm not for deferral. I would hate to be sitting in this chair should that go that way and we get penalised for non-determination. So we're minded one way or the other. It's not been approved. Councillor Baldock has made a recommendation for refusal. Joe, is there anything you want to say to that before I put that to the vote?
I think this is your members' decision tonight, whether your balance is in favour of the scheme or you consider the harm to outweigh, the harm to outweigh the benefits. my consideration and my conclusion was that the benefits outweigh the harm, but you have the right to reach a different conclusion.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Baldock, can you...
Yeah, in light of what the officer said, I'd like to add a reason in that the committee...
I was going to ask you, sorry, can you just repeat your reasons for refusal?
Reasons are loss of important local countryside gap, the impact on the wildlife corridor, the design and layout and against policy of integration across the site, and that the committee believes that in the balance, but in the overall balance, the benefits do not outweigh the harm caused.
Ian, please.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Baldock. Yep. And that's all before I ask for a seconder, which I've already got. Members, we're 7 minutes to 10. I move that we extend standing orders. Is that seconded? Agreed? Thank you very much. If we're patient, we'll get through this.
Find out, won't we?
Ian, please.
Thanks, Chair. The Chairman, the proposed development by virtue of 3 reasons for refusal, I'm suggesting. The first 2 align with all the comments you've said. The third one, I'd highlight that we've not got a completed Section 106 agreement in place. So to protect our position moving forward at appeal, I'd suggest a third reason for refusal to secure that all those elements are sorted in at appeal. 3 reasons for refusal on that basis. The proposed development by virtue of the position of the proposed dwellings outside the built-up boundaries of the Swale Borough would conflict with the Council's settlement strategy. Moreover, the development would have a harmful impact on the character and appearance of the locality, result in the affordable housing being segregated within the site, and conflict with the purposes of the important local countryside gap. The proposal is therefore unacceptable and contrary to policies ST1, ST3, DM8, DM14, DM24, DM25 of the local plan and the MPPF. Reason 2, the proposed development would have a detrimental and insufficiently mitigated impact on protected species at and within the vicinity of the site. The proposal is therefore unacceptable and contrary to policies CP7 DM28 of the local plan and the MPPF. And the third reason being, in the absence of an appropriate legal agreement pursuant to Section 106 of the Town and Country Planning Act, the application fails to secure and provide measures to meet development plan policy requirements and mitigate the impacts of the development through enhancements to services and the environment necessary as a consequence of demands created by the proposed development in respect of ecology. In respect of ecology, education, including special needs, community learning, waste, open space, healthcare and affordable housing. As such, development fails to mitigate its impact on local services, amenities, infrastructure and environment. The proposal will be contrary to policies ST1, CP3, CP5, CP6, CP7, DM8, DM17 and DM28 of the local plan and the MPPF.
Done?
Yeah.
I would suggest, Councillor Baldock, that is quite substantial.
I think it's an excellent summary of all the points that have been raised and presented very well.
Are you happy to go with that?
I'm happy to propose
From
that.
the chair, I'm happy to second that.
Thank you.
Those in favour of that proposal to refuse, please show. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Those against? Those abstaining? 1, 2, 3. Did you vote for, Peter, or against? Yeah, okay. Okay, that is refused, subject to those points. Thank you very much, and thank you to our visitors this evening. It's going to go on for a little bit longer. Okay. Agenda item 9. This is 2.5, 24-504 519-REM. Land at the east of Linstead Lane, Linstead in Kent. Please can we have the officer update? Thank you.
Of course, it's me again. Right, so this one, it's land to the east of Linstead Lane. It's a reserve matters application proposing 10 two-storey houses. There is one update. Since the publication of the report, officer received an email from Parish Council to confirm that they continue to object on the grounds reported in the officer's report. And now turning to the application itself. The first slide shows the application site boundaries. As I've mentioned before, this is a reserve matters application, so that piece of land, currently greenfield site outside of Linstead village, but it does benefit from outline planning permission that was allowed at the appeal for 10 dwellings. You can here see the aerial view of the site, showing the site in context with the build form of the surrounding development. And that is the proposed layout. So we have two-storey houses arranged broadly in line with the layout that was shown indicatively at the outline stage. To the front we have buffer, and we have compensation parking spaces. So there's 5 compensation parking spaces to mitigate loss of parking, uncontrolled parking along Linstead Lane. That is a drawing showing proposed elevation, proposed houses. That's another type. Overall, there are 3 types of the design that is going to be delivered as part of the development. And this is a third type of a two-storey house that will be delivered as semi-detached pairs. That is a CGI showing the detailing on the design. And then in terms of other CGI, and that is the street scene as currently photographed, showing the hedge in place and the application site behind that hedge. So in terms of overall consultation process, we had no objections to the proposed development. KCC Ecology also raised no objection to the scheme, and measures that were secured at the outline are delivered as part of the reserve matters application. So on this basis, officer recommendation is to grant permission subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Sorry. Right, speakers, please. Mr. Roy Gosling. Good evening, Mr. Gosling. Thank you for your patience. You've sat there a long time. You have 3 minutes as soon as you press the left-hand button on the unit in front of you. When you are ready, thank you.
As the owner of Rose House, which is sited directly opposite the proposed entrance to the new development, I wish to bring to the attention of the Planning Committee the following. I am concerned regarding the removal of the long-established hedgerow in order to facilitate the widening of Linstead Lane and create a pedestrian footpath. This hedgerow is over 50 years old and is 20 metres in length, which is providing an essential habitat for many small creatures, insects and fauna. The developer has stated that the hedgerow will be replanted, but it will take 10 years to become established. So for 10 years there will be no screening of the new development for existing residents of Linstead Lane. The removal of this hedging will result in the lights of parking cars shining straight into the windows of the existing houses in Linstead Lane. Not only that, the proposed new houses will be built on a higher ground, enabling them to look directly into the windows of those on Linstead Lane. The English countryside has now lost over 25% of its hedgerows in recent years, mostly to developers. The loss of this established hedgerow will result in the loss of habitat for our native wildlife. This field, which is becoming a housing estate, is used by bats and owls at night, and also grass snakes, slow worms, foxes, rabbits and mice during the day. The birds that I frequently see in the field include red kites, sparrowhawks, buzzards, jackdaws, jays, as well as smaller species. The habitat for all these creatures will be lost forever. With regard to the communal open green space marked on plans on the northwest corner of the site, may I inquire who is going to maintain this? I ask this as when such an area was designated on another very local site, it has been completely neglected. Furthermore, the traffic survey suggests a daily movement of 10 vehicles to and from the site. However, this was done before the inclusion of extra parking required for the proposed houses, and that is now required for vehicles displaced from Linstead Lane, some 31 spaces in total, and this does not include delivery vehicles, etc. This is therefore a woefully unestimated number of the entrance to the site. The entrance to the site needs to be rethought because of this increase in parking spaces. With parking already at a premium in the lane, this increase, although welcome, is still insufficient. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gosling. We now have online, hopefully, Megan Smith. Megan, are you with us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, perfectly. As soon as you start speaking, you have 3 minutes again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair and members. I am speaking in favour of the scheme before you today. I want to begin by stating clearly that the principle of development on this site has already been established. Outline permission for 10 homes was granted at appeal, and this decision confirmed the acceptability of development, including the proposed access and the number of deliverable homes. The purpose of today's application is to agree the layout, scale, appearance and landscaping of the 10 dwellings at this site. Since submission, we have worked proactively with planning officers and have amended the scheme in direct response to neighbours' concerns relating to the relevant reserved matters of the application. Importantly, the proposed development has no objections from statutory consultees, including Highways, Ecology and the lead local flood authority. The proposed design is of a high quality with varied materials, a sympathetic layout and an attractive landscaping strategy. This is a modest, small-scale scheme that reflects the surrounding context and delivers family housing in line with local needs. We do acknowledge neighbour concerns around parking, and the approved access to the site will result in the loss of some informal on-street parking along Linstead Lane. However, in response to this, 5 dedicated off-street parking spaces are being provided within the development for use by existing residents of Linstead Lane. This figure has not been selected arbitrarily. 5 spaces represents the worst-case scenario of spaces that could be displaced. So what we are offering is a full replacement of compensatory spaces embedded within the site, immediately adjacent to the approved access. Furthermore, a planning condition has been imposed requiring the applicant to submit details to the council on how these compensatory spaces will be managed. That means the arrangement will not be informal or ad hoc. It will be planned, agreed with the council and properly implemented, ensuring that only existing residents of Linstead Lane can park in these spaces. In summary, this scheme honours the outline permission, responds directly to local concerns and puts forward a high-quality, policy-compliant development. I respectfully ask members to support the officer's recommendation to approve.
Thank you very much indeed, Megan. Okay, we have a visiting member, Councillor Speed. You have 3 minutes, like everybody else, but please state the reason why you're here.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm speaking tonight in my capacity as a Tenement Linstead Ward Councillor and also as Chairman of Linstead with Kingstown Parish Council. The inspector identified the main issues as whether the development would be suitably located in terms of accessibility to services and facilities, and whether the proposal would comply with the council's settlement strategy. They failed to recognise that Tenham has lost 35 shops and services since 1998 and no longer has a GP surgery. They concluded that 1 bus an hour and 1 train an hour from a station 3/4 of a mile away was an attractive alternative to private car use. They acknowledged the application was in conflict with policies ST1 and ST3, being a development in the open countryside outside the built-up area boundary of Tenham and therefore not in accordance with the settlement strategy in the local plan. Inexplicably, access was also approved despite the fact the lane has restricted width, poor alignment and a substandard junction with the A2 that can't be widened because of listed buildings on either side. The inspector did acknowledge, however, that evidence produced by third parties show existing conditions on the northern part of Linstead Lane to be chaotic and harmful to highway and pedestrian safety. So, Condition 4 of the Outline Planning Permission requires the applicant to submit details of a scheme for highways works to Linstead Lane, including details of safe movement of traffic and pedestrians. This is not included in the Reserved Matters application. So you're being asked this evening to approve a scheme without knowing whether chaotic and harmful highways issues can be addressed, and I contend that they can't. Approval should therefore not be granted until these details have been submitted and agreed. Policy DM14 of the local plan requires that development proposals have sufficient regard for the living conditions of neighbouring occupiers and will cause no significant harm to amenity. It's clear that if a development would worsen local on-street parking conditions, reduce existing residents' ability to park safely and undermine local amenity, those impacts become a material planning consideration. Currently, those residents of Linstead Lane that don't have off-road parking spaces can park in the lane outside their homes. However, the proposal is for yellow lines and width restrictions, making that impossible. Residents will be forced to park further up the lane on a blind bend. Because we have no detailed highway scheme, we don't know how far the yellow lines will extend. If the restrictions end at the Apostolic Church, then I've calculated, based on the Council's SPD, that 11 parking spaces need to be provided on site as compensation for existing residents, not 5, which is what is being offered. If the yellow lines extend as far as the bend, then 18 spaces are needed, so a shortfall of 13 parking spaces. The Parish Council requested a separate parking area south of the site on land owned by the developer to properly compensate existing residents for this loss of amenity, but the request was ignored. We know why. They want to build more houses. So, if the committee is minded to grant approval, there should be a binding condition that none of the remaining land up to the boundary of Fir Tree Cottage can be developed, and its retention should be specified as wilding and biodiversity assets. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Speed. I'll move the officer recommendation. Is that seconded? Councillor Clark. Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Baldock, this also falls in your bailiwick, but... Oh, isn't it? I beg your pardon. Oh, okay, cool. Councillor Bowen, do you wish to speak as a substitute to this committee?
Yes, and I'm going to speak as a member of the committee on this. First of all, I recognise, and I really want to be clear on this, that the outline application was allowed on appeal. So the principle of the development is not up for discussion today. But that appeal did not give the applicant a blank cheque. In fact, the planning inspector imposed a number of important conditions, including condition 7, which requires a minimum of 10% biodiversity net gain, and in condition 4, highways plan. And it's on this point, the biodiversity net gain and highways, that this application falls short. When the appeal was conducted, the plan for the old Methodist church right opposite the site was to convert it into flats, with parking at the rear. However, this has now been taken over by the new church. This means that on Sundays there is genuinely traffic chaos, with bumper-to-bumper parking all the way up Linstead Lane as far as Fir Tree Cottage, which is dangerous as it goes past the blind bend. It also turns Linstead Lane into a single track with no passing spaces, which means traffic has to reverse, sometimes backing out onto the busy A2. The provision of compensation spaces adjacent to the parking bays for the new residents means there is no guarantee they will be available to the existing Linstead Lane homeowners. Residents will suffer the inconvenience of turning into the development and finding the spaces are occupied, forcing them to turn around, exit the development and park further south around the blind bend in Linstead Lane. No proposals have been submitted to ensure these spaces are reserved for existing residents. Although conditions require these details to be provided, we are being asked to approve this scheme without knowing exactly how they will be enforced. Will the developer pay for traffic wardens or wheel clamping in perpetuity? Doubt it. Double yellow lines referred to by Councillor Speed will not only mean a loss of amenity for existing residents, unable to park outside their own homes. Visitors from Linstead Village, Kingsdown, Doddington, Newham park there during the day to visit the library and some of the shops, although with fewer shops we used to have. If they can't find anywhere to park, they might go elsewhere, resulting in the loss of trade for local business. Workers in local shops also park there. Where are they going to park? The changes to the lane will result in much reduced personal security for all pedestrians and especially residents who are forced to park a long distance from their homes. Those with young children and the infirm will be especially vulnerable. The pavement along this stretch is so narrow that the people have to walk along and into the road to progress along Linstead Lane. On bin days, obstructions are far worse. Now on to biodiversity. We're told there will be gains. We're shown some tree planting, a few bird and bat boxes, even a couple of log piles. But these are just pieces of landscaping, not a quantified gain in biodiversity. There is no biodiversity metric, no baseline assessment, no unit calculations. In other words, no evidence that the required 10% gain is being delivered. And let's be honest, if this committee approves a reserve matter submission without evidence to meet a condition of outline consent, we are undermining the very conditions imposed by the inspector. It's not just a matter of good practice, it's a matter of lawful decision making. So don't forget what our local plan policy DM28 says, that development must conserve, enhance and extend biodiversity and deliver net gains where possible. The NPPF enforces this too. And yet this proposal offers no long-term habitat management plan and puts many of the new trees in private gardens where their ecological value cannot be secured or monitored. We cannot manage what we can't measure. So I'm asking members to not to overturn the appeal. What I'm asking is simple. Uphold the conditions the inspector imposed. Ask the applicant to provide a proper diversity net gain strategy, something with numbers, metrics and management, something that meets condition 7, complies with policy DM28 and respects the appeal decision. If we approve the application now, we open ourselves up to the very real risk of setting a precedent that developers don't need to meet conditions, as long as they dress up their landscaping with vague enhancements. That's not good planning and it's certainly not defensible on appeal. So I'm going to urge members, refuse or, dare I say, defer this reserve matters application until proper biodiversity net gain and highways plans are submitted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bowen. Ian, do you want to respond, please?
Do you want to?
Joe, do you want to do that?
Of course, yes.
Beg your pardon,
so
sorry.
Let's start with highways. We've had a comment that a planning inspector commented that there is chaotic conditions on the road. He did say that, but the remaining part of the sentence that he referred to was that the chaotic parking condition and road condition is caused by informal parking along the road, and he also commented that the proposed development and yellow lines in fact would improve and have beneficial impact on the condition on the road. That's the full meaning of his conclusions and deliberation as part of that matter. Now, secondly, commenting further on condition 4, this is a prior to commencement condition, so there is no conflict here in terms of when the reserve matters application comes forward, and as we correctly noted and all acknowledged, that condition requires details for off-site works. In terms of the footway, yellow lines, etc., etc. Nonetheless, I have worked with KCC Highways, and I had arranged a meeting with them where I discussed this question exactly with them directly to see what they are expecting to see to come forward as part of the Section 278 agreement, because it is agreed approach that as part of the outline application we do in fact see what is the level of work that is going to come forward as part of the highways works, and usually the condition refers the drawing and says that the works should be delivered in accordance or in broad accordance to that detail. So having that security of having an informal detail of what's going to come forward in terms of the road improvements, KCC Highways was satisfied that the compensation spaces are adequate, because another point to add here is that the transport assessment and the independent assessment that was requested by committee before at the outline stage, I understood, did comment that the worst case scenario for compensation spaces is 5 spaces. When the application came forward initially, it proposes 3 spaces, and then gradually through negotiations 5 spaces were proposed. That pushes it to the maximum based on the evidence that we have. Yes. And then in terms of B&G, again, there is a condition requiring details to be submitted prior to commencement of the development. That condition doesn't say prior to reserved matters submission. So really speculating here, if we are in a position where the applicant is unable to meet the condition, then it is back to the drawing board for the applicant, but there is no conflict here arising.
Thank you, Joe. I've got 3 speakers: Councillor Baldock, Councillor Thompson and Councillor Bonney.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to say something positive. I think, with the pig's ear that this application, this permission was, the conditions are fairly reasonable. I think we've got a good basis to hold them to account. And I welcome the fact that they have got a 2-bedroom, focus on 3 bedrooms, and haven't just gone for 4-bedroom houses. And then, what on earth is that supposed to be as an open green space? I mean, just to add insult, they chuck an extra car parking space in it. I mean, that is, you have to climb over the car to get the green space. I mean, that is ridiculous. The whole design of this just screams lazy. I think ChatGPT could have done a good job, actually. I think that's what we need to start working on. It's just, right, we can put some here, put some there. There's an opportunity here to actually create, and it's not going to be nice, but an opportunity to create a nice little estate. This is all back to back. If people isolated at the end, it's just the standard approach. Put a line, put houses here, put another line, put houses there, and then put some of that funny tarmac that nobody drives over at the end. And a whole row of cars like that, I mean, that's just lazy design. And that's going to look hideous, and I don't know what the view from Linstead Lane is going to be, and if you can cut through from the cars onto Linstead Lane and take your life in your hands or whatever. But that, or if there's going to be a fence or barbed wire or something, that just is going to have a hideous impact on people going up Linstead Lane. I just think if developers are going to get permission for these little sites, they've got to come back with something that I think our words are, and I haven't got it in front of me, but I was going to pretend, something that enhances the local area. This isn't. It's horrible. And we should just try and hold developers to come back with something decent. So that's my feelings.
Thank you, Councillor Baldock. Councillor Thompson.
Sort of come up with some of it seems a bit of a homage to the car, but I'm going back to the speaker earlier, the hedge that's on the left, which I was just trying to get my head around the understanding of the footpath. Where is it being put or implemented? That he commented that the hedge would be lost. So I just wanted to clarify where that would go and what it is.
Yes, so hedge is currently where the access is, and then it goes all along the boundary. So to provide access and visibility space, part of the hedge has to be removed, and the replacement hedge is proposed as a boundary treatment. So it will be a replacement hedge that will then join to the existing hedge being retained further down the line. The loss of a hedge has been accepted at the outline stage. This was picked up by the inspector.
Okay. Yeah, I just wondered, sorry, Chair, how far that is then? How much is lost? How far down? Just to...
If you look at the 3 trees here,
yep.
Then right adjacent, that is where the existing hedge is being retained. All of this is replacement, hedge planting with tree planting and grass planting.
Wow. So, can I carry on now? Sorry.
Yeah, please.
So, sorry, with that in mind, so is there an ecology report for that amount of loss? Because that's quite a substantial old hedge. And going back to what Councillor Bowman was saying, we need evidence of that gain, because obviously if you've lost that much habitat, I'd like to see proof of gain on that. But for me, the orientation is not very well thought out. Again, we could go back to my usual one of solar gain, passive, that sort of thing could be much better implemented. We could also have, going to what Councillor Baldock was saying, if we had thought to parking, that in fact people then get the option to not use their parking. So in other words, you have soft parking, still have it there, but if people aren't choosing to use their car, they haven't got just fixed tarmac. That's something that we're always generally looking forward to as well as areas that absorb water rather than being, again, solid. It seems, I agree, fairly lazy, so I think we could do much better than that. So, thanks.
Thank you. And Councillor Bonney.
Cheers, thank you. I actually do know this quite well. You'll be unfortunate for you all. And I've had experience of reversing off a couple of drives along there on the bend. It's a really narrow road. I think the concern here is around layout, scale, appearance and landscaping. That's what this application is for. Now, there is a direct conflict here because we are told that BNG is a separate condition. By agreeing the landscaping, we are, by definition, agreeing the BNG. And that is a problem because we don't have the information before us, so we have no idea through the landscaping what that does to the result. We are effectively predetermining the BNG calc without knowing the baseline data, without knowing any of the information. So actually, I think this makes it really difficult to make a decision, quite frankly, because I think the inspector made a mistake here. Yep. You cannot agree landscaping and BNG in separate conditions, or if you do, you need to bring them together. It's as simple as that. Now, if I go back to layout, this isn't a good design. So for every vehicle that comes in to drop off a parcel, or the postman, or the rubbish collection, they've got to go down one arm, and then they've got to somehow reverse, probably into the traffic that is coming into this mini estate, and then drive a bit further along and go to the other houses. And this is just another poor design. And if I go to Kent Design Guide, page 38, it says, be friendly, safe, attractive, well-used, steady passage of people for a feeling of safety, have a public space and squares that draw people together. Now, if you zoom out on this and you look at the layout of the rest of the area, there's very few like this. There's quite a lot of almost circular routes or terrace streets that you can get in or out of. If this was a layout that had a square in the middle of it, you could drive all the way around it without then coming headlong, having to reverse, etc. I think there is a better opportunity, a better layout. The other thing is the back-to-back gardens thing. So from a wildlife perspective and permeability, because it's right next to open countryside on two sides, it doesn't allow that. We seem to be hedging off our gardens, etc. at the bottom here, which is fine, but I don't really understand that treatment, the boundary treatment. But most importantly is this issue around residents parking, because it is chaotic there. There's clearly works going on the street to make it safer and prevent the parking that's on the street, because you need to get people in and out of this estate. I just don't think actually having the parking segregated around the corner here is a great idea. It's got, I suppose, natural security from the people in one arm or the other, wherever they choose to have the visitor or the residents' parking bays. But I'd have thought actually if they're wiping out that much hedging, which I have to say I don't agree with, taking out that much hedging along there of an established hedgerow, which goes back to our whole BNG, what is the level, then actually it would have been better to have those residents' parking bays possibly on the outside, then have a nice hedge, and have the estate. But actually, would you hedge it off? If you're getting rid of the hedge, it's going to take 15 years. Is there something better you can do? But that tiny little green space at the top is actually, like all these estates, the get out is because there's some form of attenuation there, or SUD system, which they use as an excuse for an open space, which I think is pretty poor, because it means it doesn't really get used for what it's intended to. I think it's tanked, isn't it, according to the drawings? So I think there's an awful lot that's just wrong.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. Can I ask that we extend standing orders again? Sorry, Councillor Bonny.
Yeah.
Just about to do that as well.
Apologies, yeah.
Yeah, all those in favour?
Yep, great.
Thank you. Carry on. Sorry.
So, yeah, just to wrap up, I'm afraid the design and layout, as we're being requested to assess tonight, the landscaping, we really are in a position where we can't make a decision without undermining our BNG on this, because the landscaping is both hard and soft landscaping. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you. I don't want to repeat what other people have said. I mean, I agree with what Councillor Bonny said about the layout. I was intrigued by the speaker about the hedge. I love Google Maps. It's a magnificent hedge. It really bothers me that it seems that developers like to rip everything out so they can get easier access and then put little sticks in afterwards. There shouldn't be any reason to remove this amount of hedge, and God knows what's in it, but it's not going to sit there waiting 10, 15 years for another one to grow. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Councillor Bonny.
Sorry, I had a complete brain fart and I forgot one thing. Ecology. No, it's not that old. But on ecology, it is clear from what I've read that is a desktop assessment, and log piles, as someone said, are just a temporary thing. They can be moved. That isn't a suitable solution.
Thank you. No further speakers. Joe. Commentary with regards to
I think
access.
Just one commentary. So in terms of the access, I'll repeat again, the loss of a hedge has been accepted because to provide visibility space for the access that's been approved, there needs to be a hedge removed to provide that visibility in the access as approved. Now, in terms of the design, of course, these are, very critical constructive comments, and there's as many design approaches as people in the room that can be taken to every application, every site. But I would urge committee to be very careful in terms of the reason for refusal for the design and layout and appearance, especially, well, maybe layout especially, because the layout, the position of homes within the layout, the access road arrangement and the parking arrangement is consistent with the indicative layout that's been submitted at the appeal stage, where planning inspector was satisfied that the scheme is able to accommodate the development proposed. So yes, of course, it wasn't an approved layout, but it is very consistent with what was proposed. So I would recommend being careful here.
Thank you, Joe. Ian.
Thank you, Chairman. I would stress a couple of things. That access has been approved at outline stage. Your considerations tonight, I would respectfully suggest it should be focused entirely on the internal layout within the site, landscaping, a catch scale and appearance. In terms of the comments that have been made about BNG, parking provision and all that, the approval of these reserved matters would not remove the requirement to comply with all of those conditions. The applicant is still going to have to submit details, taking BNG as the simple one, wrong word. They'll still need to submit details to demonstrate that the landscaping within this layout, within this landscaping that is approved, achieves that biodiversity net gain. They don't need to submit a metric, as was suggested earlier, because this predates the statutory requirement for BNG to be provided. In terms of the urban design, I am but a planner, I'm not an urban designer. Our urban designer thinks this is okay, and I'd strongly recommend that great weight is given to our urban designer's opinion. I know the eyebrows that got raised when my colleague said that this is reflective of the illustrative layout. That isn't binding. I do agree with what Councillor Baldock put, the point he put his hand up, and I'm guessing what he might say. This isn't, what was shown at outline stage was indicative in terms of layout, scale and appearance. You don't need to be fixed on that. However, this is considered to be an acceptable layout for the development. It achieves everything that it needs to achieve in terms of nuts and bolts. And our urban designer, as I said, is satisfied that it's an acceptable layout, and I'd strongly recommend that weight is given to his opinion. I'm not going to say my last point.
Thank you, Ian. I think there's the opening statement still sits in my mind, and it's worthy of note because it doesn't often happen. Substantial dialogue between the applicant and the officers. Substantial dialogue. You know, how many times do we see applications that are just tossed into us? That's what we're going to propose, and there's no dialogue or limited dialogue. So this hasn't been shifted around the kitchen table for 10 minutes. You know, a lot of thought has gone into it, and I think that's evidenced by the conditions, to be fair, and the commentary by the consultees. I understand it's not to everybody's liking. I understand that we don't want to see hedgerows torn down. I understand that, you know, but sometimes we have to put that to one side. Councillor Baldock.
Thank you. Yeah, the officer did make a good point, which, as the other officer said, reinforced what I said earlier. I think this is something we need to, not now, but we need as a committee, or you lot as a committee, to get nailed down. Just what is the freedom to change from, you know, what is put in outline, and then it comes forward, because they're free to change it as much as they like. But if they don't want to change it, we seem to have a trouble getting them to change it in a way we do like. Even though it's only indicative. And I hear what you say about the dialogue. I still think it looks pretty horrible. This is where maybe we need more dialogue with off-ward members as well, so that we get this opportunity to have some feed-in from what the committee thinks is good. Because, as I say, I'm torn on this, but I still think we could have got something that looked better, even though we are, it's even, well, less so if we're restrained by this indicative. But I think we need to nail that down, Chairman, and have some sort of discussion.
No,
Thank you.
it's a good point. Well made, Councillor Baldock, and certainly will take conversation beyond this meeting. Members, that Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very,
You're the reason we're going to be late, Councillor Bowen. Now.
We've extended already. But I will be very quick, and I do appreciate and thank the officers for their comments. My only return on that, as I said in my statement, there's a lot of question marks. There's a lot of what ifs, and it's missing this, that, and the other. It is not, in my view, and I get in terms of reserve matters, yes, you can put that for discussion later, and they can talk about it if it doesn't. It's not unreasonable for this committee to say, we want to see this before we decide. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bowen. That has been recommended for approval as the officer's recommendation. That has been seconded. Those in favour, please show. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Those against. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Any abstentions? No abstentions. That is approved as per the officer's recommendation. Thank you very much. Don't run away just yet. Agenda item 10. These are appeal decisions. I've said before, and I'll repeat it, there's a lot of really good information contained in this part of the agenda pack, whether it's to benefit you as councillors, as members of the planning committee, or whether it's to take on advice from the inspectorate. So please don't just throw it away. I always keep copies of these. I've got hands. I'm going to let Ian go through them one at a time. If you want to speak on that item, please show your hand. Ian.
Thank you, Chairman. Let me find my page.
199.
There we go. Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I won't dwell too long on any of them unless anyone wants me to. Sheppey Way, Eden Top, related to two appeals, an enforcement notice appeal in relation to the manner in which the site was being used, and a Section 73 variation of condition to change the manner in which it was going to be occupied. We lost both appeals. Important local countryside gap was one of the relevant considerations. There was 2 applications for awards of costs, and both were refused. If that related to a gypsy and traveller site in the way that it was used.
Anybody on 5.1? No, 5.2.
Extensions to a house. Conditions were imposed, one related to obscured and partially fixed glazing, which was considered to be unnecessary. So we won on grounds of other appeals, on the other conditions that were contested, but on that one we lost, so it's recorded as a loss.
5.2? 5.3?
Erection of basically an erection of development that would appear as sort of an extension to a caravan park. It was deemed to be contrary to the policy related to caravan parks, which prevents their outwards extension, harmful to the character of the area, and therefore it was refused.
I'm happy to applaud that. 5.4.
Inappropriate location for a barn to be converted to an agricultural building to be converted for a dwelling.
Councillor Kavanagh.
It's a question about 5-year land supply. Paradise Farm says 4.95 years. Ham Farm says 3.98 years. Can we have some clarification? Councillor Goulding looked online on Swellborough Council website and it said April 24 it was 3.98 years. So should we not have that updated now? they shouldn't be a whole year different when the appeals were only, 2 months away from each other? Thank you.
Thank you, Anne.
The through you, Chairman, the 3.98 I believe is the correct figure at the moment. The figure that was quoted there probably, and I'd need to check the dates of the decisions, probably is an earlier statement that was submitted, and the inspectorate are probably still catching up with themselves.
5-6.
Do you want to do 5.5 first?
5-5. Sorry, we'll go back then.
Internally illuminated advert for the shop near to Stones Farm. Refused on grounds of visual impact. Took on board all the other signage in the area, including the signs for Stone Farm. Found it not to be relevant.
5-6.
Removing trees that were impacting on buildings. Many reasons given to why they needed to go. The inspector said that they didn't amount to enough justification to justify removing the important visual trees. Reading the subtext, it might be yet, and that more information is required on that one.
5-7.
Two-storey side extension reviews on the grounds that it would erode the gap between dwellings.
5-8.
Coastal erosion for a gypsy site was the reason for refusing.
5-9.
Skockles came to the committee in January, where it was agreed we wouldn't defend against the appeal for non-determination, 650 houses. The inspector considered quite a wide variety of issues, including those that were raised by third parties during the appeal process. Supported the appeal.
Disgraceful, is my opinion. 5-10.
Ham Road. Two main issues have come out of this related to residential development outside the settlement boundary. Applicant failed the sequential test. The inspector concluded that despite that, no harm arose from it in terms of actual, I think they used the phrase real world harm. It seems to, not going to say that. So they gave limited or reduced weight to the conflict arising from the failure to comply with the sequential test, and deemed that it was outweighed by all the benefits of that they cited in the decision. It's all set out there, quite varied benefits: reduced flood risk, car club, remediation of land, public rights of way upgrades, housing, affordable housing. In terms of the neighbourhood plan, the inspector concluded that where paragraph 14 of the NPPF says that an up-to-date neighbourhood plan should be followed closely and not outweighed lightly. I'm paraphrasing there, that's not the correct phrasing. The inspector's view was that because the neighbourhood plan was based on a housing figure that was provided by the local authority, who in itself has an out-of-date local plan and insufficient housing, that the knock-on figure wasn't adequate, and so the neighbourhood plan, it wasn't reason for paragraph 14 to be triggered, and so the conventional tilted balance applies. And that was the view of the inspector.
Councillor Bonney, then Councillor Ben Martin.
Yeah, I mean, I think the sequential test and the view on the neighbourhood plan is contrary to what most of us think they're there for. And I think even my planning barrister was talking about it to me. This has caused quite a ripple up and down the country with planners saying, well, what's the point of a sequential test? And quite frankly, what's the point of a neighbourhood plan? Yeah. It brings the planning system into, effectively, disrepute. Further disrepute. So, yeah, anyway, there you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First off, I did note that there was more success for the officers than developers out there, so well done on that front. In terms of this particular one, yes, it's disappointing. I think it depended very much on which planning inspector you had. A different planning inspector may well have come to a completely different conclusion. It is disappointing considering how recently the neighbourhood plan was formally adopted. It goes to show that without an up-to-date local plan and the lack of a 5-year land supply, that any area of the borough, even parts that with significant challenges, can gain approval as a result of the tilted balance, and that substantial weight is being given to the housing as opposed to anything else. So doesn't matter if it's got a flood risk, doesn't matter if it's going to drain into an area that you've got no control over. We ain't got a 5-year supply, we haven't got a local plan. Tough luck. The inspector can make their own decision.
Any more for any more? Cracking. Members, thank you very much indeed for your time. It's been a long, hot meeting. It is now 22:47. I officially close the meeting. Thank you to officers and Philippa. Have a good evening. Thank you.